everybody. Hope everybody's having a fantastic Thursday. I think that's what today is. Something's been on my mind, but it's been something that, and I'll wait to really fire the monologue up until we get a few folks on the live chat. Coming in on this a little bit late this evening. Typically, I try to start off a little bit earlier, but hey, we're getting rolling now. Here's the thing. When I had first started getting back into the car thing, it's been a couple of decades ago that I got started with this stuff, and then got out of it for a little bit, mainly because there was such a lack of variety, and there was no way to get my hands on something older. There was no way to get my hands on something that I really even would get excited about. But what I keep hearing is that we're living in some modern renaissance of the muscle car era. And that kind of put a little bit of a burr underneath my saddle. I keep hearing that over and over and over again. And it's almost turned into something that people just say enough times that it's going to end up being true. So I want to give you guys my idea of this, because in the last few live shows and taking some of the product reviews out of it when I do my regular videos, but in the normal shows, we're typically talking about hot rodding Mopars, sometimes Mustangs, every once in a while a Chevy will pop in there. But I want you guys to understand something. When you hear somebody say that we're living in this golden era of muscle, or golden era of muscle cars or whatever, that could not be any farther from the truth. In fact, that statement is basically almost like a lie that people tell themselves. So what I wanted to do is and the reason why I say that is, the reason why I say it's kind of a lie that people tell themselves is because, especially in the Mopar community, you can't modify these cars without basically filling up a barf bag full of $100 bills and just throwing up into the air. So here's the deal. To put some things into perspective, as far as when the original muscle car era was really up and running and why we are so far away from that. First of all, you have to look at it like this: variety. All right, I'm just going to dive into this. Everybody check in, by the way. I'll get to everybody hopefully here pretty soon. I just got to go. I'm just going to get rolling with this. So first and foremost, back in the day, there was a variety that is just, you can't even compare it to anything today. And it didn't matter what type of car that you're talking about. You could be, or brand, I should say, that you were talking about. You could be talking about some Studebaker. You could be talking about an AMC. You could be talking about Dodge, a Plymouth, a Chrysler. You could be talking about Chevy, Buick, Oldsmobile, Pontiac. You could be talking about a Ford. You could be talking about, in some cases, a Lincoln, like, 68 Mark III Lincoln, something like that. All of these brands had significant muscle car status. Here's something else to consider. Every car back then was a muscle car, at least by today's estimation. V8 rear that was out there. And if you argue with that definition, take a look at what the general public will call a muscle car. They'll call a Mustang a muscle car. Nobody really calls a Corvette a muscle car because it's a two-seater and it's more of a sports car. But what folks don't really seem to get is there's no such thing as a muscle car anymore, not the way that there used to be. And basically everything back in those days had a V8 front engine and rear drive. So again, by that standard, everything's a muscle car, but everything was also upgradable. Also, to that point, since everything was a muscle car, even the cheap stuff, and what I mean by cheap is cars that would cost, well, I'll put it to you in this perspective. A new Mustang GT, arguably the least expensive muscle car, we'll just call it that for lack of a better word, just for purposes of conversation. That car back in the day, during the original muscle car era, would occupy, in terms of budgeting, would occupy roughly half of what an average person made back then. A typical average income back then was roughly $5,000 a year. A Mustang GT with a 390, like in 1968, like the one that Bullitt drove, would have been somewhere around, say, $3,000. So just the other side of half of that yearly income. Whereas today, average income is floating somewhere between $45,000 and $50,000, depending on what numbers you want to believe. And that pretty much is about what a new Mustang will sticker for. Let's say you can get one for 35 grand. It still occupies a lot more of that budget. And because of that, makes it a bit more difficult to own, especially nowadays when you've got other bills to consider. You've got telephone bills, higher insurance bills, you've got internet bill, all these stupid little bills that just keep adding up and adding up. Next thing you know, the disposable income just isn't there. And that's really more the argument. We just don't have the disposable income that they had back in the original muscle car era, which brings me back around to the variety. You want to talk about something that we don't have today, is that variety. But it's just everything had a V8 back then and everybody was hot rodding something. I put it to you like this, even the Jeep Wrangler, CJ I should say, had some type of a V8. Well, 304 if I remember correctly. Jeeps don't even have V8 today. So that would be an idea of where we are versus where they were back in the day. And then they say, well, during the 70s, that period only lasted from like 1960, depends on who you believe again, but 1964 at its earliest, 1962, somewhere around in there, until 1971. My argument is that it lasted from 1964 to about 1979, because even through what some people will call the malaise era, you still had all the muscle cars that were made before, plus any car that was still being made with a V8 front engine and rear drive, and you had direct connection. You had Chevrolet Performance, Ford Racing Performance parts. All of that stuff was in existence. The manufacturers were supporting the grassroots racers. Street racing was still a very big thing. Drag racing, taking your car to the drag strip, again, still a very big thing. And the manufacturers took care of those enthusiasts. Again, something that we really don't have, at least not on the Mopar side. So, something else to take a look at. Hey, Sean, thanks, man. Appreciate that, buddy. Appreciate the contribution to the cause. But to me, and Sean brings up a good point there, now is faster but less variety. But the problem with fast, and this gets into this, well, what about these legends from the muscle car era? Well, the only thing that we're comparing modern cars to in terms of now versus then are ET slips. Oh, and by the way, let me just reset and say this. If now is the greatest muscle car era ever, then why do the cars look like the cars from the old era? Why do they base the looks of this thing around the old car? Mustang's still kind of the same way. Camaro doesn't fall into that, and neither does Charger. Which brings up another good point. Think of the manufacturers that were around in the original muscle car era. They were all American manufacturers. There were no foreign manufacturers. For good reason. I mean, the gas embargoes and things like that hadn't taken place yet. But the reality here is that if you look at every car that was made back then, by today's standards, as far as is it a muscle car, everything that was made back then could have been hot rodded and you would see it at the drag strip. Nowadays, it's just not like that. And it's pretty evident when you do go to the drag strip, it's Mustang, 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 Challenger, 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 Charger, Charger, Camaro, 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 rinse and repeat. Oh yeah, sorry, and a few vets in there, and that's it. So anyway, let me check in with everybody real quick, and I'll get back into visiting with you guys. Hang on just a second. Yarmir, hey man, damn, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Saying, what up, B? What are the best size beadlock welds, weld size, and who's your size for a 2008 SRT Charger? Man, thank you very much. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate that too, buddy. Well, it depends on what you're going for. I'd go 15 by 10s. I would go with a set of 20 probably 28 by 12 slicks if you're going to go that route. But it just depends on what you're going to be doing with it, what your power level is, how hard you're going to be hitting out of the hole. Do you even need bead locks? There's a lot of really fast cars going deep into the 9-second range without running bead locks. So, I mean, if you're running bead locks, that means you're throwing everything and the kitchen sink at it. So by that way of looking at it, you're also going to have to do a 15-inch conversion. I mean, if you're asking for what is the best, 15-inch conversion, again, a 15 by 10 weld slick bead lock setup with, you know, again, 28 or a 29 by 12 Mickey Thompson or a Hoosier slick. But again, whatever you're running on the car, man, that's what's going to dictate the tire. And again, you can have too much tire. You know, you want to at least have whatever you need to get that car to hook, plus maybe a little bit in reserve. But the more tire you go, just remember the more rolling resistance that you're going to have. And that's a big thing. You're also going to have, you know, big fat tire, more rolling resistance, and a little bit more wind resistance. You've got a lot of things that you're going to be rolling up against. So hopefully that answers the question, but thank you very much for the contribution, brother. Let me check in with everybody real quick. Nick's in, Robert's in, Speed Freak saying, what up? Good evening, got the arm flex, I like it. Donald Sweller saying, what's up, man? Let's see, Nick's saying he's got a 6.1 and he loves it. I wouldn't mind keeping it for a build later with my son. That's probably the smart money right there, brother. Listen, that 6.1 is as close to you can get to a LS platform with the Mopar. So, yeah, stick with that platform, man. Eric's checking in saying, what up, B? Smoking 05 saying, howdy, Mr. Mason. Got the devil horns. Woo, what's up, man? Let's see. Bass Finder or Base Finder, whatever you're saying, is saying, what does molar mean? Probably talking about Mopar. Molar is a tooth that you have in your head. You've got 8 of them. We might be thinking I was saying molar was actually Mopar. Christopher's checking in with Lincoln. Yep, what's up, man? Destroyer 1320 said, hey, Professor Mason, yeah, that Lincoln Mark III, dude, 460, 365 horse. Still one of my favorite cars ever. Shawnee saying, good evening, B. What up, Sean? Alex is checking in. Evening, Professor. Destroyer 1320 saying, hit the like on the way in. Yeah, y'all hit the like on the way in, guys. Donald's asking a good question. A lot of guys ask me this question, and I have answered it in the most ambiguous way possible. He's asking, when doing a cam, is it worth it to get the heads ported? Here's the thing. Your heads, if you've got an Apache motor, the engine platform, anyway, any of the newer stuff, 15 and up, you're looking at heads, really I should say 12 and up. Those heads are going to flow on a 5.7 somewhere around 310-ish, 315 CFM. It's a very stout number. The 6.4 heads flow a little bit more than that at about 330, 340. I personally don't think you need to get your heads ported. I don't see any reason for it. You're not going to be able to outflow your heads because you cannot outflow your intake manifold. The intake manifold is the limiting factor there. So I would argue that it is not worth it. Now, when the heads are off, would it be worth a cleanup? Yeah, it probably would. That's when they go in and just shave them by like 10 thousandths. Just go just a little bit off the top, or should I say bottom in this case, just to ensure flatness. But aside from that, don't worry about it. Now, that being said, if you're going with a different intake manifold, you're going to get like the Victor intake, you're extrude honing it, and you're throwing the kitchen sink at it with a cam, you're trying to spin this engine around 72, 7,400 RPM, then in that case, yes. But you already know what you're getting yourself into if you're going that route. So in that respect, the heads will be worth about 20 to 25 horsepower, give or take, at that power level with a stroker combination with everything at max effort. So just so you know where that's coming from. Alex is saying, Donald Swaller, depends on your cam profile and what you're trying to do with the car. Good points. We're talking about, Alex. Again, Sean, thank you very much. And he's saying 65 to 71, hard to beat. Now is faster, but with less variety. So here's the thing. Here's what folks forget is that you can hot rod anything with a V8. You can make anything with a V8 sound good. And when every car that you see on the road has a V8 rear engine or four-wheel drive like the trucks, whatever the case is, all of them have healthy sized engines, anywhere from 307, 350, 400, whatever, big blocks, whatever. All of those things will smoke the tires, right? That's really the idea behind muscle car. Just tearing ass in a straight line, acting like a dumb kid. Hey, it sounds like my kind of good time. With your girl on with your girl on your arm, just acting like a fool, everybody screaming and laughing and having fun. That is muscle car status. That is having fun. Look around you. Is there anything like that going on today? Hell no, there's not. There's some semblances of it here and there. But everything is a basic transportation appliance. Take the Prius stuff out of the equation. That actually has kind of its own cool place in automotive, platforming, if you want to call it that. Just if you're into hot rodding things to get badass fuel economy, which is actually a thing, by the way. A lot of the guys, when I was, by the way, like, big sidebar, but a lot of the guys, when I was big into the Vipers, doing all the street racing, top end, dumbass, idiot stuff that I was doing, a lot of those guys were also taking the Honda Insights. If you guys remember that, it basically looked like a half of an egg going down the road. And they would trick those things out to get 70, 80 miles per gallon. So go figure. Anyway, getting back to it, Honda Civics, right? Those types of cars. The generic transportation appliance today is just some front engine thing. Front wheel drive thing. It's not a front engine rear drive type thing. Whereas back then, everything was like a typical crappy commuter car would have been a Nova. Granted, it might have had a 6-cylinder, but yeah, funny how that 350 just pops right in there. Or, it could have been, the family station wagon. Well, the family station wagon might have had a big block in it. 4-barrel intake manifold, and maybe have the local speed shop do some work on the head. You got something that'll white smoke the tires till you take your foot off the gas. That's the difference. When I'm talking about variety, I mean that everywhere that you looked, there was some kind of a muscle car, muscle truck, muscle van, muscle contraption. It's just not like that today. It's such a truncated segment. And really, again, you've got the Challenger, the Charger, the Mustang, and the Camaro. And that's it. That's what makes up the muscle car segment today. Is there another one? Okay, maybe a C-Class Mercedes. Nothing really from BMW, and I say C-Class because, what else are you going to call out from the Euro segment? On the Japanese side, or the Asian side, however you want to look at it, the new Genesis looks great. You can maybe pencil that in, but damn, you're really having to grasp at straws. And of course, you've got trucks, but let's be honest. Truck is what a truck is, right? We're not really talking about the trucks in this case. So we're so not in a muscle car era. We've got some cars that are fast. We've got technology that allows for cars to be unimaginably fast on the street. But it's not like that didn't exist back then either. You had plenty of cars that had 10-second capable power to weight ratios. Any B-body with a big block would get you fairly close. That had been worked over very well, just hot rodded general type stuff. But everything back then was around a 13-second car. So, but see, that's where I want to draw the line here for the discussion. The problem is the numbers will allow the comparison from back then to today. Speaking of that new Civic, what does that new Civic run in the quarter mile versus what is just a regular 396 Chevelle run in the quarter mile? Probably would be a reasonably close race, at least for a significant portion of that race. And that's where people will say, the performance is the same. It's not even close. You ever drive a big block car with an automatic, 3-speed automatic at that, or a 4-speed, it's a completely different driving experience. So you can't really compare just the times. This is one of the situations where the numbers lie. So anyway, let me check back in with everybody here. Cam Oli's got it about right. We are in the golden age of bank-owned cars and dyno sheets. Well, there's a lot of bank-owned cars back then too. Financing was still a big deal. But I will say this. Again, it just didn't make up enough. And that's the other thing. You're kind of onto something there, though, because most people finance their cars for much, much longer now because you have to, based on cost. Back then, most people would only, damn skeeters, got him. Most people would only finance their cars for 3 years, 4 at the most. And you're considered nutty if you went 4 years. I mean, 3 was the thing. And a lot of people would trade in at 2 years. So again, I mean, you start looking at it from a financial standpoint, from a power standpoint, from a just variety standpoint. Yeah, we're nowhere near that. Let's see. Alex is saying, hang on. He's checking in with you. Okay. I was saying, could be that FCA doesn't see a point in developing a direct connection or aftermarket modding at this point since they see electric vehicles as the future. Yeah, maybe. I mean, you might be onto something there, but I mean, believe me, if electric car is the way to go, then I'm gonna be hot rodding that thing too. I mean, believe me when I tell you, you can make electric car fast just like you can internal combustion. The problem is that there's no support for what they have now. Kind of hard to build brand loyalty when the brand isn't loyal to the customer, and especially to those customers that are driving the business for them. Think about that for a minute. Shawnee's saying the old school driving experience was very fun, even though they were only running 14s and 15s. Man, look, I remember rolling up to the Sonics when I was a kid, and you had everybody's, again, hot rod pickup trucks, Falcons, Mustangs, you had Camaros. Every once in a while, somebody would roll up with a Vet or a street rod. You had some really cool stuff that would show up. 64 or 65 Savoy that would show up at that Sonic. I mean, we had a pretty cool local calling out, out where I lived, and man, I'm telling you, they would go out, you'd hear them racing on some of the frontage roads. They'd come back around, and it was a lot of fun, man. I mean, everybody would light the tires up. Cops didn't care. Nobody gave a care about it. It was just everybody having fun with their cars. And nobody does that anymore. And so, yeah, the drive-in thing was cool. The Sonic thing was real cool. It's just a shame that we don't really have that anymore. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with running 14s or 15s, man. Look, a 14-second car will, a V8 powered 14-second car will do a pretty good set of damage to a set of tires. So certainly and here's the other thing, a 14-second car or a 13-second car. Let's talk about a 13-second car, because that's when you get the flavor for something fast. Like the first time you ride in a 13-second car and you've never ridden in anything that quick before, that 13-second car is going to feel like a freaking rocket. Because that's when theater begins. That 14-second range, like that 1450 to 1350 range, that's really when the show starts. That's when you're barking second, maybe even barking third gear in a manual transmission. You've got something that is capable of lighting the tires up, capable of getting sideways, capable of getting your attention. What the hell flew in my mouth? God damn it. Did that fucking bug fly in my mouth? Yeah. Anyway, protein. That's when things start to get interesting. So, 10-second cars, 9-second cars, 11-second cars, yeah, I guess they're cool to talk about, but the stuff that's fun to talk about are the ones that kind of got you into the lifestyle to begin with. And again, Yarmir, thanks a ton, man. I appreciate that. And Nick, thank you very much, buddy. I appreciate that. Didn't have a question, but thank you, buddy. Shawty's saying, man, you're making me miss Pontiac, Mercury, and Oldsmobile and Plymouth. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, that's when we had all that variety. Think about the Mercury Cougar back in the day. Cougar Eliminator. If you don't know what a Cougar Eliminator is, you have got to Google that car. That is, again, one of my all-time favorite cars from the 60s, and super awesome car. Basically anything from the SCCA era. So you got the 70 Mustang Fastback, the AMC Javelin, AMC AMX, the Camaro, the Challengers, the Cudas, the AER Cudas, the TA Challengers. Those are the ones that I like the most. So just because it's, you know, who says a muscle car can't go around corners, right? I should have let them run big blocks in those cars. Anyway, Nick's saying, we lack a variety. My grandpa talked about building a Chrysler Cordoba 383. Absolutely, you can build a Cordoba. That'd be a sweet-ass hot rod, man. Frank's saying, what is the highest wheel horsepower for current Hellcats that you would say is safe before, what is going on here? Would it safe before need to upgrade or build the engine stock? No, seriously. In talking about the Hellcats, highest horsepower numbers, things like that, depends on, number one, where do you live? What's your fuel quality? Number two, are you going to run it on 93 octane gasoline? You're going to run it on E85? That makes a major difference. If you're going to be running on E85, make sure you're testing your E85 because you can get a bad tank of E85 and blow your engine up. So what's the max number? Okay, well, let's start out I'm going to answer the question right now. On a Mustang dyno, so I would say somewhere around 700 to 725 horsepower is the max safe number for pump gasoline, 93 octane. 675 to 700 would be about the max that I would want to see on a Mustang dyno on 91 octane. Again, fuel quality is going to dictate what this maximum number is. If you start talking about E85 on a Mustang dyno, I would say somewhere around 850 horsepower would be your basic. I would say 8.25, 850 would be the absolute most, but a very safe place is 800 to 825. But you've got to have all the supporting kit to get you there. And if you're going to be going there, then you already know how much that is going to run you. So, to review, not much more than stock. If you go E85, you can make a little bit more power out of it. Now, when do you want to rebuild the engine or you know, do other things to that engine and make it more durable? I'll tell you what, man, the Hellcat platform has proven itself to be unbelievably durable. I've seen 800, 900, 1,000, 1,100 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno with a bone stock factory short block. These are cars that are beat on very regularly and don't seem to show any signs of wear or fatigue. I've also seen cars that have been tuned, maybe tuned with a 295 upper, that have got 150, 175,000 miles on them and drive, look, act as though they've, any other Hellcat you'd see, mileage is an irrelevant number to that vehicle. So, that being said, those are cars that were tuned at Pike's Performance. These are cars that are very regularly maintained. They are beaten on mercilessly, but they are lavished upon afterwards. So just know that coming into it. You're going to have to maintain it every bit as, well, with all the fervor that you would be wanting to, you know, get the power out of it. So, oh, and as always, if you're running E85, don't forget your oil change intervals are now cut in half. Let's see. Sean's asking me, what do you think was the bottom of the performance era? 80, 81? Yeah, you start getting the very early 80s. 1982, 1983 is really, really not good. 1984 is where things start to look up and where the planning for some of the cars that came later began. So, but yeah, 1984 would have been some of the worst. And then from there, it started getting better into 1986. And I say 1986 because that's when Ford gave us the ubiquitous fuel-injected 5-liter, as we would know it as the 5.0. That would have come in 86, and that would have been really when the modern era of muscle, that's the genesis of it. For a lot of people, that's what they'll say. So I'll agree with that. Base Finder saying, yes, Mopar means what? Oh, Mopar, motor parts mashed into one word. That is correct. So Mopar from back in the day is short for motor parts. And it was Dodge and DeSoto's Dodge, actually, I think it was only Dodge. Dodge, Chrysler, DeSoto, Plymouth. Yeah, basically all of the Mopar family, but it was their motor division, their parts division, and weirdly enough, it just kind of morphed into what people called the DeSotos, the Dodges, and everything else. It was just Mopar, and then Mopar turned into the word that you just said. Instead of saying Dodge or Plymouth, you would just say Mopar. So that's where all that came from. Shawnee said, I meant to say old school driving experience. Yeah, no, I get it for sure. Madeira saying Lincoln and Chrysler cars were considered to be personal luxury and family luxury cars. Hell, some Fords and Dodges fell into those categories. Absolutely, they did. They did, but see, here's the thing. You could do some really cool stuff with some of those cars. And again, I mean, it's going to be cool if it's got a big block in it, right? I mean, you can do something with that. So aside from the Cadillac, which didn't get a whole lot of love until later in life, you have some fun with those big cars. Let's see. Shawnee's saying, if I see another crossover, I think I'm going to puke. Look, I get it, man. I'm tired of being told that I like crossovers. I can't, they're not doing anything for me. Let's see. Scat Speed saying, what up, Mason? Got the arm flex. I like it. Scat Speed is asking, what is in the box? Oh, behind me? That is a mattress, actually. We're in the middle of doing some home improvements, and so we ordered one of the new mattresses that, as you pop open the box and it springs out like a jack-in-the-box or whatever. But right now it's acting as my bottle holder here. Oh, hey, buddy, what's up? Torquey coming out to say hi. What up, buddy? How you doing? My big baby over here. Let's see. Mopar Fam 300 saying, yeah, what up, man? Asking, did he see his messages on Instagram? No, I didn't. And I'll be talking about Instagram too. Guys, if you want to send me a message on Instagram, that's great. Number one, do it during business hours. Number two, if I see them, I see them. If I don't, I don't. I don't typically chase that Instagram account down too much. I'll post stuff up, but on occasion I'll go on there and answer questions, but typically no. So, but yeah, if you send me something after business hours, if I answer, it's only because I've got my phone on me. But if you send me something and I'm asleep, I'll just delete it. I don't even look to see who sent it. It can be an emergency and it'll be gone. Let's see. Cody's saying, I'm for sure going to sleeper route with my 4.7 Durango. Throw nitrous at it. No, you'll like it. They're a fun engine. Good Mercedes engine. Scott saying, I drove my buddy's 68 Charger for a week and it was amazing. Sounds great. See, that's the thing. You get to see what that old school driving experience is all about. Smoking 05 is hanging out with Scat Speed, asking about the CUDA. Let's see. Alex is asking, I hope that ice doesn't completely go away, especially in the muscle cars. Electric cars have all sorts of advantages, but they just have no soul, and those batteries are horrific for the environment. He's talking about internal combustion engines, by the way. So, yeah, that's one of the big issues when it comes to the electric car argument is, well, they've got to make the batteries. There's a lot of energy being spent into making an electric car. And that's what a lot of folks don't really seem to understand, is that because it has zero emissions in my area doesn't mean that it has zero emissions globally. And in many cases, I forget who did the study. It was a British thing. I can't remember how this came about, but anyway, it was Land Rover versus an electric car. And it was one of these things, I mean, y'all can look it up. It's been a while since I checked this out, but how much energy does it take to build a Land Rover? How much energy does it take to build an electric car? And it turns out that you could drive, I think the bottom line to this, if I'm remembering this correctly, and man, it's been a while since I even looked this stuff up or was looking into it, but it was something like you had to drive the Land Rover for like 10 years before it would, or drive the electric car for 10 years before you would equal what it took to build and power the Land Rover for the same amount of time. So, yeah. Not quite the energy efficiency. And by the way, That's 10 years on an electric vehicle. I don't know how long those battery packs last, and I think do you have to replace a battery pack? Then you're going to be even further behind. So anyway, let's see. Heavy SRT saying scat. Busimi saying I have a Hellcat with 4-star 7x10 D5 bead locks with ET Street R305 45 17 rears. Will the 315 50 17 work on the car? I have a 309 gear. B suggested the gear, so I put it in. Good call. So first and foremost, okay, well, the 315 50 will kind of work. If you have a Challenger, you're going to be doing a lot of massaging for your wheel wells. I'm pointing at it like you can see it. Anyway, you're going to be doing a lot of massaging to the wheel wells to get that tire to fit. I wouldn't be so quick to want to go that route, though, because by throwing the extra tire on there, what you're actually doing is you're reducing that effective gear ratio. So depending on what all you've got done to that car, I would say that you would be better off sticking with the 305 45s and just working with tire pressure at that point. I think you're going to have better results with it. Now, you start throwing a bunch of power at the car, it might help you, but don't necessarily recommend it. But you can make them fit. If you've got a charger, it'll be a lot easier for them to fit too. Jay saying, don't swallow the bug. They may have the virus. It's all right. Smoking at 5 saying, I remember when I had my first 13.5 second car, it was quicker than 90% of the other cars in the street. No kidding. And that's the fun thing. See, and that's the other thing. So let's talk about that for a minute. When we're talking about the original muscle car era, you have to remember what those cars were engineered for. That's when boomers were basically the ages of 25 to 50, it depends on how you want to look at it. You had older guys that were buying them, younger guys that were buying them, all the way around. You could buy a car from the factory that would basically be a 13-second car, and it would be a lot of fun, but it was a plaything. They didn't expect these cars to last very long. They knew that they were going to blow them up, wear them out, do whatever. They were simply not built to last. I mean, if you've ever been around these things, and believe me, I'm working on one right now. It's working on a truck built in 72. These things are about as agricultural as you can get. I mean, it's basically a tractor. The cars were the exact same way. They had great styling, but the build quality, the fit and finish, everything else, I mean, believe me when I tell you, you're not looking at the best that money can buy. And they were priced accordingly. Again, inexpensive playthings. What's funny is that at some point, nobody, especially in the mid to late 70s, nobody ever thought that these things would be worth any money. Again, it would be like thinking that your Voltron toy would be worth any real money. It was just a plaything to, I don't know, it's a drinking game at this point. Every time I say plaything, take a shot, right? But that's really what they were. So, I don't know, people just didn't, because they didn't cost that much, they had a tendency to tear them up, but everything was a 13.5 second car, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And that's really where the fun begins. That's what they are engineered to be. Fun, had a great noise, again, did everything. It was kind of cool, but nowhere near the speed that we have today. Certainly nowhere near the modified cars that we have today. Nowhere near the drivability or efficiency or safety that we have today. Let's not forget about that. But, not like you can't make them, I mean, they're safe enough. But, I mean, dude, you wreck something from back then and the only crumple zone you got is you. So, anyway, getting back to it. Harley saying, even Mercury Cyclone? Of course, Mercury Cyclone. Steve Colvin saying, hey, B, what's up? Big brother, how's it going? Going good, man. Smoking at 5 saying, my first car is a 72 Charger, then a Fury, then an A-body Barracuda. Very nice. Old school Barracuda. Edward saying, my 13 SRT 8 Challenger driving experience is comparable to the 73 Challenger I had back in the day with a mild-built 440 with a manual valve body 727, and it was a second quicker in the quarter mile. You know, that's the thing. I mean, you go back and you start to look at what was out there and what you could have fun with back then. It was just a little bit different mentality for cars too. I mean, most guys did a lot of their own work. In fact, that's the other funny thing, is that most of the guys that grew up messing with the old school hot rods, it didn't take you long to become maybe not an expert, but you basically knew what you were doing with your car. And there wasn't a bunch of, well, there was, but the BS like what you see today, it just wasn't out there. I mean, people were actively working on their own stuff. So, it's one of the things is that you would take pride in what you did with the cars instead of shipping them off to a shop. So anyway, again, you can't really do that today. I mean, you can, but I mean, you can't just reach into something like this and just start yanking stuff off of the car. I mean, it's not quite the same. Now, there are modern cars that are oddly easy to work on. Vipers, the C5 Corvette, C6 Corvette, real easy to work on. In fact, it'd be easy to teach somebody how to work on a car in a Viper. They're probably one of the easiest cars in the world to work on, especially the Gen 2. But it's just funny how, we're talking about cars from back then versus today. And yeah, you're going to say, well, the technology of today and all the safety things of today, and I get all of that, but again, when people start talking about modern muscle cars, do you include the Mustang with that? Because to me, it's kind of hard to do that. I mean, muscle car kind of gives a certain mentality to me. I think a Mustang like SCCA racing, I think a Mustang as in some cases, in some flavors, drag racing, but I don't ever see it as a muscle car. Not the way that something that you would immediately associate with a big block would be, like a Chevelle, like a Roadrunner, like a Galaxy, something like that. Getting off topic here. CJ saying the only negative thing I have to say about the 2021 Ford Bronco is that it doesn't have a V8 option. I was originally in that boat, but I think with that 2.7, you got to remember the 2.7 is nicely upgradable. I think with the size of that vehicle, I don't know that a V8 would really be needed based on the power that 2.7 is going to give it. 300 horsepower, 400 pound-feet of torque. You can ramp that up to 350 and 450 pretty quickly. 10-speed automatic with the ability to basically do anything and everything you would ever want it to do. I think that's going to be right on point for where that Bronco is going to be. And again, guys, that's one of the few cars that has me somewhat excited. And I'll even go so far as to say this. I mean, when you start to look at the Bronco with that 2.7, think about it for a second. 2.7, 300 horsepower. Let's say you can bump that up with tuning and bolt-ons or whatever. Let's say you can kick that up to 350 or 375 horsepower. Torque will be somewhere around 450 odd pound-feet of torque. That's kind of muscly to me. I mean, it's a V6, but you can hot rod the thing a little bit, have yourself a little hot rod Bronco. I think that would be pretty damn sweet. As a matter of fact, I think you're going to start to see a lot of these modern so-called muscle cars showing up again for now a new reason in your local used car lot, basically your Ford Motor Company's used car lot, I should say, with folks trading Scat Packs and Camaros in on Broncos. I think that a lot of folks are starting to get a little bit disenchanted with, well, let's face it, the 392. I think you're going to see a lot of those things floating around down there. And unfortunately, whether you like to admit it or not, that's the way that these things go. And right now, Ford has got the market segment. So, you got your sports car on one end, the Bronco on the other, and you can say, well, what about the Scat Packs Jeep? Jeep doesn't have an engine that's comparable to the Bronco. You can say, well, it makes 285 horsepower. Yeah, but it didn't make anywhere near the torque. So, and it does, I mean, yeah, it's a Jeep and it looks like a Jeep, but it doesn't look like the Bronco. Let's just say that the Bronco is the shortstop that just crushed a freaking 3-run blast. And I don't think that Mopar is going to be able to compete with it. Hang on just a second. CFL James, man, I thank you very much for that. Didn't have a question with it, but thank you very much for the contribution to the cause, brother. Thank you very much. Man, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. Let me get back up here. Man, thanks a ton, brother. I appreciate that. Made me lose my mind. Made me lose track here. Thank you. I appreciate that, brother. Let's see. 1320J saying, I remember you saying 3% loss of power per 1,000 foot of elevation. That's true. Does that apply to forced air apps? Sorta. I'm at 6,000 feet. Just curious if I face a Kitty or a ZL1. So here's the thing. Yes and no. So at 6,000 feet, you're looking at about an 18% loss in power. If for a belt-driven forced induction application, that's going to be positive displacement, centrifugal, it doesn't matter. If it is a belt-driven application, then yes, that same formula applies because there's 3% less air for it to gather up. Now with turbos, a little bit different story. The reason why it's a different story is because turbos, if the wastegate is closed, a turbo will keep producing and keep spinning and keep trying to fill that manifold until the wastegates open up. Turbos will make boost until something doesn't allow it to make boost. Either back pressure in the exhaust is the determining factor, or if it blows the engine up, but it will make boost until those things happen. So if the wastegate is still shut, the turbo is still trying to feed it boost, it might take it a little bit longer to get to the boost level to where it cracks a wastegate, but it will get to that level. And in that case, the turbo will actually get faster with elevation until the point where the turbochargers cannot attain the manifold pressure needed for a specific power output. And this is how it worked in airplanes. Basically, if you have a turbocharged engine, your ceiling is determined, your ceiling in this case, power ceiling, is going to be determined by manifold pressure. And manifold pressure on a turbo is static up to a certain altitude and then it starts to drop. Whereas manifold pressure with a belt-driven supercharger, gear-driven, or what have you, just mechanically driven supercharger as opposed to gas-driven, will consistently drop as altitude is increased. So hopefully that gives you an idea. In other words, you can have, let's say if you've got a 300 horsepower engine that's turbocharged, you'll have 300 horsepower up to about, say, 15,000 feet in elevation. In actual physical elevation. I'm just picking a number because it's easy to come up with. It's, say you got a real big turbo on a small engine and you're just trying to have 300 horsepower steady state cruise. Or I'm sorry, 300 horsepower open throttle, not at steady state cruise. Then you can definitely do that with a turbo. And if you start 15,001, then the turbo, the wastegate will just stay shut the whole time. It'll never crack open. Let's see. CJ is saying same here. Oh, yep. Ethan Heck saying UOB hope all as well. Tell me what the deal is with the Camaro. Why is it not doing as well as the Challenger and Mustang? I've always thought it was overall bare bones power car of the three. Man, so Chevrolet did something kind of funny with the Camaro. What happened here is, can I get him? Freaking skaters, man. That storm's got them coming in like in flocks. Anyway, the Camaro doesn't fit the bill in terms of being more Mustang than Mustang or more Challenger than Challenger. It is a tweener. It doesn't do things as well as either the Challenger or the Mustang. And so it just kind of gets funneled into the bottom. So for the Camaro to have won the fight, well, first of all, the odds were stacked against the Camaro to begin with. And what I mean by that is you've got the 6.4 liter in the Challenger. Charger too, but we're just going to talk about the two-door varieties. So 6.4, very torquey, very snappy, very high tip-in torque, lots of horsepower. Yeah, the Challenger is heavy, but it's a big car, big and comfy, and it's an American muscle car. It's what people think of as a muscle car. You know, on a 392, you throw a set of drag radials on it. It'll almost, I mean, it'll still light them up, but you can get the thing to dead hook if you learn how to drive it. Lots of fun on the street, but again, real snappy torque, and will pin you to the seat to about 110 miles an hour. The Mustang, on the other hand, is the exact polar opposite. It's the yin to the Charger and Challenger's yang. Doesn't have a whole lot of torque, although with a performance pack and 355 gears, it will certainly get your attention, but it's got a top-end rush that cannot be compared with anything, especially at that price point. Upgradable, very good ergonomics, very efficient use of space, very hard to compete against that 5-liter Coyote engine, especially again with that top-end rush. So where did Camaro dial it back, or how did Camaro get it wrong? Well, first of all, it's a 6.2 liter, basically the same size as the Hemi that it's competing against. But it was at a 30 horsepower deficit. It came to the party with 30 less horsepower. Not near as much torque, not as snappy, not geared as aggressively as it should have been also. So again, you know, it kind of had a little bit of that corporate flavor to it, that, you know, bean counter thing going for it with, you know, I'm sure fuel economy numbers and things like that. Add to that, so it's not as snappy, not as fun to drive off the line. Quite honestly, at the drag strip, it was getting housed by every scat pack that it raced, tire for tire, drag radial for drag radial, in stock form. So there's that. I mean, it was losing races it should have won because it was so much lighter because of gearing and just being down on power. And then you look at the Mustang. Ergonomically speaking, the Camaro is a complete disaster flick. You can't see out of the thing. The window is literally only this wide. The styling didn't really appeal to a lot of folks the way that the Mustang and the Challenger did. Interior quality wasn't near up to par with the Mustang or to the Challenger. It just, again, ergonomically, it just did not light anybody on fire. And so you had guys that would normally have bought a Camaro, well, they were buying Mopars or they were buying Fords. The other thing is that Chevrolet was having a hard time retaining their own customers with that car. There just wasn't a lot to write home about with it. Now, granted, sure, you can throw long tubes, cam, intake, this, that, everything else, you know, throw about $8,000 at the car and have a really fast car to talk about, faster than the Mustang or the Challenger really at that time, initially. And of course, we're talking about naturally aspirated stuff here. But they just did a terrible job of putting something out there that the people that were buying these, you know, American hot rods, they were putting something out there that nobody was really wanting to buy. And you know, the Mustang can get by on looks alone, and the ergonomics, I swear to this day, it's like they aliened into my bedroom, took my measurements, and made a car literally to fit me, because the GT350, by the way, is tailor-made for my ass. But it's just funny that just the efficiency of the Mustang interior, coupled with that driving experience and with the potential that it has for modification, especially when it comes to forced induction, drove so many people over to Ford. And I mean, that's, to be honest with you, that's how it happened. And here's the other thing. This is a good example of, it doesn't matter what the numbers say at the track or what a roll race will show on a video. It's the driving experience and the fun that you have with that car. Scat Packs are a lot of fun to drive, man. They are real snappy, love to light the tires up, giddy all the time. They make a great noise. I mean, you tell me, hey, when you drive one, you're like, oh my God, this thing's a riot. The Camaro is a little bit more hard-edged, and yeah, it handles better, I guess, but only empirically, not objectively. And I'm sorry, only subjectively, not objectively, for what you would consider to be normal street driving. So this is literally a case where the facts just simply, this is a better car in some respects, but not better where it mattered. Not better where it mattered by a long shot. So now what do I think Chevrolet could have done with the Camaro to make it better? Well, for one thing, don't show up to the party with 455 horsepower and think that you're just going to win every argument. The second thing, the ergonomics have got to be improved. The interior of that car has got to be improved. Visibility's got to be improved. But I mean, we're looking at a car that's going away in 2023. So really, we're just beating a dead horse, if you know what I'm saying. CJ saying my teacher B Mason loves the big giant American cars, especially ones with V8 powered rear wheel. I'm late. I wouldn't trade 2002 though for 2015 of American performance for any other, from the 02 WS6, 03 Termi, 08 GT500, 13 GT500, 14 Z28, the car that broke my heart, 15 Hellcat, and 13 Viper, etc. So in saying that, I would say, yeah, we had some of those cars, but think of it like this. The GTO, a clean GTO is getting hard to come by. Terminator Cobras are all but impossible to find. And again, that's still a Mustang. I mean, y'all know where I'm at with the GT500s from back in the day. I love those cars. Those were all super cool cars, F-bodies, all of that. Awesome cars. But again, when we're talking about a modern era, I think that what a lot of folks were talking about is basically 2015 and up, where the older cars were really cool. And don't get me wrong, I mean, that's when I was doing most of my work was, 99, 2000, 01, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's when, on the car side, that's when I was, raising the most hell. And I can tell you that those were some of the most fun years because there were so many mid 12-second cars, mid 13-second cars running around. But again, the variety just wasn't there. I mean, it was yet another Camaro, yet another Mustang. Hey, at least we had the Lightnings to talk about back then. But, today to see a clean version of those cars and trucks, for that matter, is so hard to do. But it kind of falls in line with the old muscle car era where, I mean, unless somebody just really fell in love with their car, like let's say somebody had a 390 AMX, unless they were just in love with that car, they would end up trading it on at some point, or it would start to rust out, or just like any old car. I mean, look at how many F-bodies you see running around that look like they were just dredged out of a lake. I mean, let's face it, at some point, that car gets into part of its life cycle where it's just, a fun, loud mode of transportation for somebody. And they end up getting neglected and they end up, getting torn up. Paint starts to fade and a couple of chips, dings, bumps here and there. Next thing you know, it's just another car. Part of the overall value here is to think of it like this. If you've got one of those cars, or if you're thinking about building one of those cars, just remember that you may have the only nice variety of that F-body, or you could have the only really clean version of that Terminator Cobra, or GTO, which is another one. I really liked the GTOs. Again, try finding a nice one nowadays. You might have the only nice one within 3 counties. So just like the old original The old original muscle car era, I mean, they're starting to get few and far between. Even the stuff in the early 2000s that you could have called a muscle car, kind of a hot rod, like the Holdens, which would be the GTOs, they're getting harder and harder and harder to come by. Let's see. The good point, though, to you. Mopar fam saying 9 to 5. Yeah, just during the day, man. During the day, no later than 7, because if I'm training or if I'm doing something like that, I can't get to that phone at all. Ethan X saying, when I say power car, I meant good torque and power, lightweight and great aftermarket. Yep, I agree with that. CJ saying, so basically we're not in the golden era. The thing is that back in the day, and this is kind of the point I was making earlier too to you, is that every car was a muscle car. Grandma's station wagon had a 383 in it. Grandma's Oldsmobile Delta 88 had a 455. Trucks had 400 small blocks, 396 big blocks, had, everything had a big engine, basically. They sounded good. A commuter car, a Nova was considered a commuter car, and a Nova with a 307 would have been as the same thing as just any generic transportation appliance today. Everywhere that you looked was a hot rod, or at least should I say a potential hot rod. It wasn't a crossover SUV thing. It wasn't something that looks like an electric Razor, a Civic thing. It wasn't anything like that. It was a car that if you got in it, started it up, and put the pedal to the metal, it would light up at least one of the rear tires. And that's really that golden era where everything was a muscle car. I mean, you had Plymouth Satellites with a 318. You try to find one of those today, a clean Plymouth Satellite, say a 71 Satellite. You can't find those things today. They were everywhere. I remember when I was a kid, you would see those things everywhere. Those things, Galaxies, Monte Carlos, everything. Again, everything had a 350 or a 400 small block or or some version of a big block in it. And of course, you could put exhaust on it, headers, and playing around with carburetor jetting or intake manifolds and all of that. That was all stuff from back then. So, the golden era, no, we're nowhere near that. But if you look at the performance and just the numbers, yeah, we're beyond it. But we just don't have the bandwidth of vehicles that they had back then to compare against. And some of the really cool ones, especially the stuff from American Motors, I'm a big fan of those cars. The SC Rambler, the Scrambler, as it would have been called, the AMX, the Javelins, love those cars, man. I think they're just super cool looking. And plenty fast too, real torquey engines, by the way, with upshot. And you can throw an intake on it, throw a cam in them, they make plenty of power. So not quite the aftermarket support that the big three had, but still plenty enough, and enough to where you could build an 11-second car out of the thing, no doubt about that. Again, CFL, man, appreciate that again, brother. CJ saying Joe Biden wants to ban all new gasoline-powered cars once he's in office. No. Let's see. CFL saying trans brake feature not working on my 1320. Where to start looking as dealer is baffled and useless. It is going to have something to do with the actual operating system that you've got. If it's not working at all, then that's where that is going to come from. So that it's probably going to require a reflash to get it working properly. I know some of the demons, I think, ran into that same problem, if I remember correctly. Biage is checking in saying, what up, B? Saw today a teaser from Al Oppenheimer of the next electric Hummer. We'll see what Dodge comes out in the near future. We'll see about that. CJ saying electric cars are not as environmentally friendly as people think. No, they're not. Alex Andrews is saying it's also the heavy metal / rare earth metal extrusion and refining process for those batteries that makes them horrible. Yep. Also recycling or disposing of them when they wear out, not just CO2 emissions. Yeah, it is. Not to mention, I mean, where are the batteries made? I doubt that they're going to be made in the States because the EPA regulations will probably not allow for some of that. Not to mention, how much does it cost to transport these things all over the place the way that they do in the middle of their build cycle? Let's see. Mopar fam saying his friend of his has a Vortex supercharger on a Scat Pack. He's gone through 4 fuel pumps in a couple of months and said it's basically ruined his car. What's the issue? Well, if he's gone through 4 fuel pumps, I can't really understand why he'd be going through 4 fuel pumps. I mean, what fuel system did he install with the car? I mean, obviously you're going to have a fuel system with something like that. So, when you go injected engineering, dual pump kit, and or at least something along those lines to get that thing working. It sounds to me like he may be running a booster pump on the stock pump, and something might not be wired up properly. Mm-hmm. Might be pinning that booster pump. Might have that thing set to like, who knows, 20 volts or something stupid like that. It's just cooking pumps. That's where I would start. King's Eye saying, would it be financially wise to convert a V6 Charger to have the Hellcat drivetrain? None of the bells and whistles, just the drivetrain. That has come up a couple of times. Would it be financially viable or responsible and all of that? You could build a car with that powertrain for less than buying a Hellcat, but not by as less as much. Does that even make sense? What did I just say? Anyway, not by as much of a margin as you might think. And again, it's going to come down to, making gauges work and things like that. There's a lot of little nuance type stuff to that'll just really get on your nerves. You can do it. I just would probably argue that it would be a bit more of a pain in the ass than it would be worth. Alex is saying, King's Eye, not at all. There is so much you'd have to refit, rewire, and replace to do that. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with it too. Let me get my fan going here, man. It's hot and muggy as hell. I just don't think that you'd be real happy with the final result. Once you started getting into the middle of that build, I think it become more frustrating than rewarding. Let's see. Cody's asking another question for my Durango. As far as power mods go, would pulleys, intake, shorties, H-pipe with dual exit, throttle body and spacer, and an OBD2 or can tune be a safe setup without cracking the engine? Absolutely. It's what most people do with their cars. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just keep good gas in it, and you'll be fine. CJ's checking in. I'm sorry. CJ's checking in. The only things that will truly keep you is by paying attention, keeping your eyes on the road, no distractions, and no playing on your cell phones. Those are the things that will keep you truly safe. Well, there's that too. You can't fight the laws of physics there. Mopar Fan 300 saying, what about Chrysler 300? Are those just as easy as working on a Viper? No, not at all. I mean, it's the same as working on any LX platform, LA platform car. They're not bad though. They're just not going to be as easy as some of those early Vipers. Especially when you consider the fact that you have to pull the heads to change the cam in the Mopars. But no, they're good cars though. Madera's asking, I love the American luxury cars of the 60s because a Lincoln was a Lincoln, a Caddy was a Caddy. They weren't just dressed up Fords and Chevys. Real talk on that. In fact, it's kind of funny. Back in the day, if you bought a Cadillac, you got a Cadillac engine, and it was typically a big engine that didn't rev past 3,500 RPM, and it was just there to generate torque, man. That thing was there to lug around a lot of weight. Real smooth running engines, the whole bit. Ford and Lincoln still shared engines for the most part. Not necessarily a bad thing, but Caddy took things to a little bit different level with their stuff. And, not necessarily the best engines in the world, but If you kept them stock, they'd run for a long time with no issues. Just don't try to turn them hard. Time and buy a Mark III or Mark IV Lincoln two-door with a 460 and have it tweaked and have a fast as heck car. So we've got one down here. This thing is ridiculous. It looks the part. It's awesome. In fact, I drove to Dallas to go check out one. It was green, 68 Mark III. Wanted that car so bad, but it was, what is this, freaking Iron Man mosquito? It was just too far gone. But yeah, I wish I could have gotten my hands on that. Yarmir, thanks again, man. I appreciate that. Man, thank you, sir. He's asking, do straight pipes make you gain or lose horsepower? Do catbacks make you gain horsepower? So let's talk about, do the straight pipes make you gain or lose horsepower? No, they don't really do anything at all in terms of power. They're not going to make you gain or lose any power. Not in this configuration. And he's asking, do catbacks make you gain horsepower? Catbacks can. If you've got a 5.7, especially an earlier 5.7 car, putting a set of scat pack mufflers and manifolds on the thing will help out a ton. That's more of a total exhaust system. Depends on how restrictive your stock catback is, but if we're talking about these cars, for an SRT car, for a 392 car, basically, you're not going to pick up any power because these cars already have an optimized catback system on them. Now, again, the 5.7 can benefit basically because it's just got a more restrictive exhaust system, keeps it nice and quiet. So it depends on the car that we're talking about. If you're talking about a pickup truck, then yeah, you can pick up a little bit of power because typically, or any kind of a stock V8 application, you can typically pick up a little bit of power without sacrificing any torque or anything like that. That's not going to be an issue. So yeah, don't worry about it. If you're planning on doing straight pipes or doing other things like that with your car, the only thing I'll tell you about running straight pipes on a car is that it gets annoying real quick, especially if you're running an X pipe, because they just get real shrill. Now, if you run straight pipes with an H pipe or straight pipes with two H pipe sections, that sounds pretty damn good. So anyway, just my O2 on that one. Let's see. But thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Shawnee saying, oh, I already got that one. Let's see. Daly's saying, while in high school, 83, my parents bought me a 65 Ford Fairlane. When I left for college, it got passed to my little brother. My uncle now has it and drives it around on the weekends. Nice. Shawnee, 67 Fairlane with a 427 is my dream car, sleeper from the factory. Hell yeah, that'd be a rocket. Scat Speed saying, I like that Bronco. So do I, man. Josh was asking, how about a new Dodge Power Wagon with a large Hemi option? If they'd ever, put a large Hemi in there, I mean, we're talking, big cubic inches, I'd be on board with that. At least 426 cubic inches. CJ saying, you don't always have to rely on airbags or safety equipment, except for seatbelts, in order to keep you safe. Just pay attention. Yeah, it's true, but you can't control what other people end up doing. That's really more to the point. Mopar fam said, well, FCA is going to release a Jeep JK with a 6.4 liter Hemi with 400 horsepower and torque. That's way more than the Bronco. Yeah, don't hold your breath on that, man. They were also showing a Hellcat powered variant of the Wrangler as well. So, if they release it, that's fine. But as a Jeep enthusiast, I mean, we got one sitting in the driveway, like right over here. As a Jeep enthusiast, I can tell you that I would be a lot pissed if Jeep showed up to the party with the 6.4 and never offered the 5.7 in the Gladiator, in the JK, or in anything for that matter. I mean, how much harder would it be to outfit or to option the Jeep with the 5.7? Like everywhere. Like, you can't option the 5.7 right now, but they're gonna give you the option for a 6.4. And here's the other thing. Fine. So let's say they give you a Jeep with a 6.4. What do you think it's gonna cost? Huh? That thing is going to be so papered up, it's not even going to be funny. That's going to be $65,000, $75,000 Jeep. Meanwhile, the Bronco, which is basically a freaking smiley face on wheels, by the way, that thing is give just nothing but good vibes. That thing's going to go for what, 45? Seriously, 45, maybe 55. I don't even know what the price is going to be on it, but it ain't going to be Jeep money. And that's the thing about it. It's not going to be Jeep money, but it's going to have everything and do everything that Jeep can't do right now, which is, I don't know, have a little bit of power, have a little bit of towing capacity, have something that's fun for a change. And look, there ain't nothing wrong with the Jeep. Don't get me wrong. Love me some Jeep. Again, we got one sitting in the driveway. Still, it's one of the hardest things to talk about for me because I've seen what the aftermarket can do with engine swaps and Jeeps. You know, when I was a kid, I helped a friend of mine put a small block in a Jeep. Really more just me handing tools and, you know, whatever. But anyway, I was around for that. But at the shop, we would tune the LS swap Jeeps, LS with a supercharger Jeeps, 5.7 Jeeps, 6.4 Jeeps, Hellcat swap Jeeps. You want to talk about a riot? Drive a Hellcat swap Jeep Wrangler. Kind of redefines your idea of fast, by the way, or scary, I should say. So there's that. But yeah, if they're going to do something like that, the aftermarket's got them beat by years right now to that punch. And yet they're still not offering a V8 variety. They're still only offering the 3.6 liter. And granted, it's 285 horsepower. That's not enough. Not for the weight of that thing. And if you've never driven it, here's the thing. So to that point, by the way, if you've never driven one of the new Jeeps, excuse me, one of the things that you'll notice, especially if you don't drive the 8-speed, you drive a 6-speed, that engine is not well suited to that vehicle. It makes great power above 4,000 RPM, but for a Jeep, you want power down low. I don't understand the engineering mentality behind it. I mean, if nothing else, I would much rather see something like a detuned 5.7. Something, instead of making 370 horse, maybe it's making 340 horse, 330 horse. It's got a super long runner intake on it, and this thing's making peak torque somewhere around, I don't know, 2,300, 2,500 RPM. But anyway, that's just being somewhat logical, and it'd be so easy to do. There's no engine development. You take your basic 5.7 out of a Challenger or Charger, redesign your intake manifold, stick in the thing, and you're done. It's easy. Alakazam. Let's see. CJ saying, heck, I've even seen Mopar and Camaro guys trading in the Scat Pack and Chargers for Challengers and SS Camaros for EcoBoost powered F-150s. Yeah, because they work. And they work very well. And they're upgradable. The 2.7 and the 3.5, you can make some pretty decent power. And a lot of guys, by the way, swear by that 2.7 liter. So just know that coming into it. White Knuckles saying, what's up, B? He's got 2 fist bumps. I like it. Saying, good to see you live tonight. Good to have you on board, man. Thank you very much. Scatsby said, I'll trade in for a 1320 Challenger or a Mojave Gladiator. CJ saying, would you be very disappointed if V8s were replaced with twin turbo V6s? Nope, not at all. Nope, because let's be honest. I mean, you can make a whole lot of power with a V6. I mean, Grand National, GTR, version whatever you want to bring up. There's a lot of V6s out there that are legendary and make a ton of power. Cyclone, Typhoon, you know. Some of the most legendary modern cars are all V6s, and the fastest, nastiest of the bunch are all GTRs. Let's see. Queasy's checking in saying, that's why I'm starting to lean towards a used 5 liter as my first V8. Good way to lean. Saying the car still runs on 87. It will be familiar to my V6. Challengers are so expensive even for decent RTs in my area. I wouldn't run that thing on 87. You can run it on 87, but it's a dog on 87 octane. And again, Yarmir, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it, bud. Anthony's saying, tried to find a Termi for 2 years, bought a Hellcat. It's a luxury version of the Terminator. Hard to find good stuff up here in Minnesota. I understand completely. Mopar fam's asking about, what about a 2008-9 Pontiac G8, GT, and GXP? Yeah, I mean, that's, again, getting more into the Holden side of things. Mopar fam saying, Chrysler 300 was a muscle car too back in the 50s. It was, actually, 50s into the 70s. In fact, some have argued that it was the first attempt of a muscle car. Let's see. The Steve's checking in saying, sorry I'm late, got the arm. Inside the rear driver's side door on my Charger has lifted and separated due to heat and humidity. My car is still under warranty. Will Dodge give me issues? No, they shouldn't. If it's within your 3-month, 36,000 mile thing, they will not. CJ Colvin saying, my mom wants to put a 5.25 horse LS3 in her 2010 Camaro RS with her 3.6. When her 3.6 goes out. Just get rid of that car and get you something with a V8 already. Kurt's asking, will someone ever make an early Hemi block, i.e. 392? Well, yeah, Dodge did. You can still get parts for that engine too, by the way. So if you need parts for an early Hemi, I don't know what you're asking, but yeah, that's still out there. CJ's saying, well, the older, 4x4s like Broncos and Blazers, those are muscle cars. That's what I was saying earlier. Trucks, vans, everything had a V8, and that's really the more to the topic is that everything had a V8. Everything was a hot rod. You could have the theater. Look, even if you didn't have the performance, whatever that word means, like the straight line performance, you didn't have to have it. Again, a van with a 350 will still smoke the tires, okay? A Monte Carlo with a small block, it doesn't matter which one it is, will still light the tires up. It will still make the noise. All of the theater is there. All of the show is still there or potentially still there. Your daily commuter can be a weekend hot rod if you wanted it to be back then. Or at least sound the part if you wanted to roll up to the local cruise-in area. It was all available to you. And it didn't matter if it had a 2-barrel carburetor and stock manifolds, it would still sound good with the right exhaust. So, I don't know. That's why I try to tell folks, they say, well, this is the golden era. I'm like, no, this is nowhere near anything golden. And look, nobody is saying that the modern era isn't superior. It's just not the golden era. And I guess that's really where I wanted to take this conversation. But as you guys know, I'm so easily sidetracked. It's squirrel, But the thing is that there's no way to compare that era, even with the early 2000s, late 90s cars. And really what got us kicked off in a big way, obviously the 5-liter Mustangs, the F-body Camaros and Firebirds. But you get into the Lightning, and really what in 1999 when the Lightning was released, that was the ushering in of the modern big horsepower supercharged cars. Before the Lightning, there just wasn't anything like that. Supercharged, something that gave you the feel the performance, the power of something with a big block engine. Nothing did that like the Lightning. Not even to this day, by the way. The slow revving, low revving, supercharged V8 makes 400 odd horsepower, 450 pound-feet of torque. That was the muscle car, the muscle truck that really kicked things off. So, you know, when people are talking about, you know, Hellcats and GT500s and ZL1s and everything else from today, that is all happening in the wake of the Lightning. I mean, you take Terminator Cobra, doesn't exist without the Lightning. You know, the GT500 doesn't exist without the Lightning. It all began with that truck. That's why they're so special. Now, by today's standards, no, they're slow. They're hard to make go real fast. I mean, you can get one into the 11s, but then where do you go from there? Whereas today, everything runs 10s, right? So, you know, LS, turbo, LS cam, heads, intake, whatever. I understand all of that, but nothing is quite as cool, and nothing will give you the driving experience of that Lightning. Not unless you throw a bunch of converter and a bunch of gear at an LS-powered contraption. Like an LS-powered truck, it just won't get there. Not naturally aspirated. So, although at our drag strip, some of the fastest vehicles out there are trucks. Let's see. Mopar fam's asking, what about the 6.1 SRTs? Referring back to the exhaust topic. Oh yeah, no, those are fine. Those have got real good exhaust on them. Anything with a 6.1 is going to have an optimized exhaust. Shawnee is checking out. Good night, Sean. CJ is saying the Bronco will definitely destroy the Jeep with ease. In a lot of ways, it will. Madeira saying, I dream of one day owning one of those 56 Continentals. Those are nice. The Mark II, those cars are so beautiful. Probably swap a 390 into that just for long-term ease of repair. One of my favorites is 58 DeSoto, 58 Dodges. I'm right there with you. Same era, same time frame. Such awesome looking cars. The only downside, and I've found quite a few of them out there. I'm kind of a DeSoto fan myself, and the problem is you're going to be into something like that. From what I've seen anyway, and just from me working on my truck, you're going to be replacing literally every component on that vehicle. It is so difficult to estimate how much money you would end up spending on it. But I mean, unless you've got 150 grand floating around, you can't bring one of those things back to life. And then the downside to that is that you'll never get any of that money back. So, yeah, I've looked into them, and the folks that can appreciate them, we're losing them daily. So, both the cars and the people. See, CJ saying the only V8 powered Jeep that I haven't seen is a Ford Coyote swap Jeep. I haven't seen that either. Mopar fam saying the 300 Magnum RT, Charge RT had higher torque back in 05 and 08, 390 foot-pounds. And they were 340 horse. Yeah, different cam profile completely, different intake as well. Longer runners. Calix asking, if you go to a dealer and are seriously considering buying a used Hellcat, what's the important thing to ask? The important thing, there's a lot of important things to ask. Number one, do you have service history on the vehicle? What modifications are done to the vehicle? Has the car been wrecked? You're going to want to you're going to want to sniff all over the car. Don't buy a modified Hellcat. You see pulleys, unless you know the car and know who tuned it, I'd kind of run. That's another good question. Have you done a read file? Does anybody even know what a read file is? What has been done to the car in terms of tuning? Does anybody know this kind of stuff? If you're buying something like that, you need to have something that says everything that was ever done to that car. If you've got that and you have peace of mind in it, do your research. If it checks out, then you'll be in good shape. Go ahead and buy the thing. But especially if it's stock. If it's stock, chances are it's been pretty well taken care of. But if it's been modified in any way, shape, or form, keep looking until you find a clean stock one. There's a lot of Hellcats that have been blown up, put back to stock, and then traded in or sold like that. It happens to a lot of guys. Not necessarily a bad thing, but they'll basically just get them fixed up enough to get them back on the road and then run for it. So you may not ever know if anything's been done to that car or what that car has seen, but use your better judgment. If it looks clean, if it drives well, nice and tight, you should be in pretty good shape. Don't worry about if the car has been taken to the drag strip or anything like that. That's really not going to be that big of an issue. But look for things like, does it have an aftermarket drive shaft? Does it have aftermarket half shafts? Does it have a diff brace? What all has been done to that car? Look for burnt, tire boogers in the fender wells. That'll give you at least an idea for how the vehicle was driven. But the big questions are, is there anything done to it beforehand? Carzilla saying Can-Am Mavericks are pretty awesome. Anything Can-Am is pretty awesome. Mopar fans asking, did the Grand National start the V6 powerhouse trend, or was it Japanese cars? Well, for the States, it was the Grand National. Yeah, I mean, you had the Grand National, and then right after that, you had the Cyclone and the Typhoon, the trucks, basically, the truck and the SUV from GMC. That were the V6, the 4.3 liter turbo V6s, which were all-wheel drive and freaking nasty as hell. But yeah, for really anything at that time period in the mid 80s, the T-Type and by rights the Grand National would have been the car that brought that mentality to bear. And keep in mind that at that point in time, you also had the Turbo Trans Am that came in 1981 too, by the way. So don't forget that car. But that car was never really a true powerhouse. But it gave you an idea for where the industry was moving. And at that point in time, the V8 was basically seen as being ushered out. It wasn't until really coming systems and computers were coming out that would allow V8s to make and be efficient under all driving conditions. In other words, be efficient enough to maintain and meet certain EPA guidelines. But coming into that, people were looking at, well, V6s, and like I say, the 301 in the Trans Am is still a V8, but it's this little wussy small V8. But that was kind of giving you an idea, like, look, we're going smaller in displacement, making V8 power, big V8 power, primarily V8 torque, and slowly but surely kind of getting you off of that V8 mentality. But again, once engine management systems really started to get good and manufacturers could put better heads, better intake manifolds on these cars to really start kicking up the power, that's when things really started to get interesting. But yeah, the Grand National, I would say, is the one that got everybody really worked up over V6s. Let's see. CJ saying twin turbo V6s are great, don't get me wrong, but they'll never have the soul and character as well as the sound of a big V8. That's only if you're raised to believe that V8 sound is something that's all that great. I mean, you could be coming from somewhere where a V8 is just basically a tugboat motor. I mean, it's not, a turbo V6 will have all the soul in the world if it's a performance engine. So yeah, don't worry about the liveliness and just the sheer driving experience of that V6. Believe me, twin turbo V6, when it's tuned right exhaust on it, sounds pretty darn good. So, but you're right, it sounds weird in a Raptor. Um, Callus is saying 72 Dodge Demon, I want one. Me and you both. Madera's saying, while the 368 Y block was a great plant for its day, but the aftermarket just isn't there. No, they're not. And that's, one of the original, big overhead valve motors for Ford. 368 Y, that was really it was never going to be a performance engine. It was literally just there to move mass. And nothing more for that point. Chris is asking, what makes the 6.4s sound so much better than the 6.1s? Part of it's the exhaust system. Primarily the exhaust system, I should say. Mopar fam's asking, Trackhawk or Durango SRT? Trackhawk for me. Dailies Forever, my dream car is an early 70s Cadillac hearse. That would be awesome. That would be kind of awesome. Let's see. CJ Colvin's talking about Power Nation doing a resto mod on a 72 Mercury Marquis. The high horsepower 460 base 557. Yeah, I think that's an old build that they did. I don't even watch Power Nation anymore. Are they even still around? Aztec saying, what's up, buddy from Houston? What's up, man? Comrade Yuri saying, this is the golden age. Only if you look at it, and this is the other thing. Okay, so is it the golden era? Only if you look at it so narrowly as to only see the numbers from a very small group of cars. And also to that point, the number of cars that are actually affordable. We talked about the variety that we simply do not have anymore, and I kind of laid out my reasoning behind that, but let's be realistic about what folks can and cannot afford. I mean, a Hellcat, there are so many Hellcat, there are more Hellcat variants than there were Hemi variants back in the day. And talk about expensive, by the way. Nowadays, every one of these cars is at least stickering for close to $50,000. With Hellcats coming in somewhere around 70. It is difficult as hell to justify spending that kind of money, but there's only a few cars that are even checking in like that. In other words, to get that 12.0, 12.2, 11.9 performance range, that's what these cars are stickering at. So a lot of folks just can't afford that, and those that can afford it are, and I say can in quotes here, but it's a real stretch to afford that. Plus, you're literally stretching those payments out over more years. That's why I tell guys, man, don't mod your daily, dude. You're into these things for a lot of years. Don't go doing that kind of stuff. But that's kind of where we're at right now. GS1 is saying, oh, wait, hang on. This one here. Mopar fam saying, what are your thoughts on Mopar 360 Magnum V8? Is there an aftermarket for them as far as performance? There's a slight aftermarket for them, but nobody's really chasing the Magnum either. It's a little bit different than the LA platform. Sort of the same. There's some slight variances there, but you're going to find a lot more aftermarket support for the LA than the Magnum. It's just because, what else would you have found the Magnum in other than a truck? So it's one of the reasons why. GS1 saying, not the golden era muscle, however, as you said, almost everything goes fast, 10s or 11s, maybe something like golden age of street cars, something like that, something off the cuff. For me, you're talking about the highlight reel of the muscle car era, of the modern era, I should say, in terms of performance. You've got everything being compared to a Hellcat in terms of drag race competition. You've got everything being compared to the Mustang as far as everything else, modability, notwithstanding, which the Mustang wins that argument in a lot of cases. And the Camaro of all things being looked at as, well, there's also the Camaro to talk about. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but people do forget about the Camaro. ZL1's a great car too, by the way. Don't forget about the ZL1. But primarily what we're talking about is, you know, the highlight reel. Where we're at today is where everybody wished they could have been back then. But just like anything else, I mean, you always want what you don't have, and you always want more, but at what cost? And what are you willing to compromise to have that more that's out there? Are you willing to compromise driving experience? Are you willing to compromise safety? Are you willing to compromise a fun factor you didn't even know that you're going to lose to step up into one of these things? Are you willing to give those things up to be able to come back with a time slip? And I would argue that it's not necessarily an easy answer for a lot of folks. I think initially, if you're gunning for a time slip and you're trying to gain or get to a certain goal ET wise, then yeah, you'll give up whatever you need to give up to get to that piece of paper. But once you've got that piece of paper, everything in your wake starts to catch up with you. It's like you've chopped the throttle on a boat, and everything that you've passed up starts to catch up with you. My argument is this: if you're having fun with your car, don't fix what ain't broke. Perfect example of how that applies to today, where a lot of guys, especially when it comes to the Mopars, and we're talking about, you've got to paper up, and we all know about the Mopar tax. But the Mopars are a lot of fun as they are from the factory, and a lot of people want to get more out of it. They're enthusiastic about their vehicles. They want more. They want something that's faster. The problem is that they've already got something that is faster by rights than practically everything that they've ever driven before in their lives. That's the funny thing about this, is that somebody will get a, like, say, a Scat Pack. I always fall back to the Scat Pack because it does some things incredibly well and it doesn't do other things as well. What do I mean by that? So Scat Pack does everything great. Throw a drag radial on it. It will dead hook on the street. Once you learn how to drive it, it'll hook up on the street, goes real fast, pin anybody to the back of the seat, snap a neck all the way to 100 miles an hour, 110 miles an hour. Lots of fun on the street, and not really fast enough to get you in a ton of trouble. I mean, yeah, you can go from zero to bottom of the jail cell pretty fast, but play your cards right and use your head a little bit, you can have a lot of fun for a long time. But they get into a roll race scenario with a 5-liter with a few bolt-ons and get walked on, and all of a sudden it's, I need a cam, I need exhaust, I need nitrous, I need a blower. Hold up. If that's the case, I mean, the car doesn't run any different. It's no less fun than what it was when you originally were driving the car. It's just there's other cars out there that do other things better and don't do other things as well. And one of the biggest criticisms that I had with the Mustang was that it felt so slow compared to the 392 cars out of the hole. It just, I mean, you just wonder what happened, and they just keep revving and revving and revving, and the sense of acceleration is never there. And that's something that I try to tell folks, you know, when we're talking about comparisons between cars, and when I say bookending the driving experience, if you have the opportunity, drive, like if you're a Mustang owner, go out and drive a Scat Pack car. You're going to think that the car has 500 cubic inches, all right, just from taking off from a dead stop. You might notice it noses over a little bit on the big end, but it just is always pushing you in the back of the seat, and the sense of acceleration is higher with the 392, no matter what you're doing with it. Whereas the Mustang, on the other hand, you never feel the acceleration. It's like when you go for, let's say you go to the airport, jump on a 737 and you're on a flight, right? That initial takeoff, it's so smooth, you never really feel that thing accelerating, but you never really get to the point where, I mean, you have to realize you're doing 140, 150 when wheels come off the ground. But you never feel that, right? The acceleration rate isn't that great, but it's the same acceleration rate for a long period of time, or for a longer period of time, I should say. And that's what the Mustang is. It's a different driving experience. It's something a little bit different. And that's the fun thing about the Mustang, is it is that different driving experience. Not that it's bad or worse. You know, that's why, you know, there's a flavor of ice cream for everybody's taste, and the Mustang's just different from the Scat Pack. And again, getting back to the Camaro is just a conglomeration of two things. It's like, you know, mint chocolate chip and orange sherbet. Yeah, they taste great separately, but you try to mix the two together and it probably make you, you know, barf out your ass. That's kind of what the Camaro ended up being. So it was just a bad chord. It just didn't resonate with a lot of folks. I would say, personally, nothing can beat the sound of a V8 for me in most cases, although some inline 6 and V6s come close. For me, inline 6, I love the sound of an inline 6. Now, I don't know why that is, but, you know, Jaguar inline 6, the Supra's inline 6 with a turbo, RB25 out of the Skyline, any of those, I don't know. I like the inline 6 turbo sound. Or any of the inline 6s for that matter. Aztecs asking, what was your best ET on your 392 and mod list? Was an 1136. I think it was an 1136. Ran a couple of 1130s, 1139, I think an 1136, and 118 and 118 and a half miles an hour. The car had a cat delete pipe, Pike's performance tune. That was at full weight, by the way, on the 20-inch 20 by 9.5 inch SRT wheels with 305 35 20 Nitto drag radials on the back of it. But again, that was at full weight. Had the passenger seat in the car with the rear. I think the rear seat was in that car at the time too. Running half a tank of fuel. So that'll kind of give you an idea. I had cleaned up some casting flash in the intake, but I didn't port it at that point. Stock throttle body, Hellcat intake, Hellcat snorkel. That's it. So not really much at all done to that car. CJ saying there's plenty of tuned EcoBoost F-150s that are whooping up on V8s. That's right. A lot of them at the track, by the way. Especially a lot of the tow vehicles are EcoBoost trucks. Peter's saying I like it. Let's see. I like it. See Dodge bring back he likes to see Dodge bring back the 440 like my grandpa's Challenger had. Absolutely. Alexander saying maybe because I was raised around a 74 Charger at an impressionable age. Nothing wrong with that. Daly's hanging out with Mopar Fantasy. Callis is saying, you had mentioned before the ring gap issue with the Scat Pack. Would just replacing the rods and pistons solve that problem? No, it's not really replacing the rods and pistons. I mean, if you're replacing rods and pistons, then you're going to be putting new rings onto those new pistons. And at that point, you would have to, again, change the ring gap itself to be able to accommodate the kind of boost that you're looking to run. So by that standard, you can just do that with stock pistons. You could say that, on a 4050 board, you go to, 25 thousandths, 27 thousandths on your top ring and on your second ring, and you'd be in good shape. And really at that point, you could probably run whatever boost you wanted to through the engine within fuel quality reason, of course, and not have any issues. The problem is the ring gap is real tight and the ring land is very high on that piston. So I think the stock ring gap, I think on the Hellcat is 20 thousandths, I think. God, don't get me to line on that because I don't know off the top of my head. I've seen some reports and it was tighter than that, but I don't think that it is. Not how this engine runs, but the ring land is lower on the Hellcat piston. So And the top of that piston is absorbing a lot of that, is able to absorb and dissipate more of that heat. So again, you're starting with basically an 11-to-1 engine. Screw it, go to 27 or 28 thousandths, top and second ring. You can probably get away with whatever you would get away with or want to get away with a stock, stock piston and rod up until I don't think you'd pop a rod until probably 700 or 800 horsepower of the rear wheels anyway. So at that weight, but at that point, most guys will just go pistons and rods, use the stock crank, go with the exact same ring gap I was telling you about, and do whatever you want with the thing at that point. Keep 11-to-1, run it on E85, run about 14 pounds of boost through it, make a ton of power, and just tear ass with it. Let's see. Mopar Fam's asking a pretty good question, asking, is it worth doing a Challenger? Golly, man. I mean, I know guys do it. There is some hot rodding involved with it. I mean, is it worth it? I mean, you're going to be spending money to do it. If it's me, I go with an E-Force every single time. You're going to get the 2650 compressor, which is slightly larger than the IHI. It's almost as good as the IHI is from an efficiency standpoint. It's either almost or at least as good as an IHI, fairly close to that. It's a clean looking system, and you don't have to go playing around with it sits down on there. I know that, from a budget minded standpoint, it's kind of cool and it kind of looks the part, but man, if it's my money, I'm going with the E-Force kit and just calling it good. Unless somebody puts together a full-blown kit for installing one of those in your car. Again, to me, it just doesn't seem worth it. I know that you can save money, and I get all of that, but that E-Force kit is damn good, man. Let's see, Alex is asking, hey, B, what's better for a cheap hot rod, pre-97 or post-97 GM F-body? Post-97. Talking about Gen 2 LT1 or Gen 3 LS1. You go LS1 every time, dude. I wouldn't waste any time with an LT1 if you've got the LS1 sitting there waiting on you. Madeira saying, I wish Dodge would bring the Dakota back and maybe make an RT version of it with a 392 in it and do something crazy, make it rear-wheel drive only. Well, shoot, I mean, why stop there? I mean, they're putting Hellcat engines into everything else. They would build it basically based off something that would look like a Durango anyway, so I say go for it there. There's a couple of things I would like to have seen Dodge do, and I just don't see them do it yet. I mean, yeah, the Durango would be kind of neat, mid-size, but you realize that they really don't have a full-size SUV. I mean, the truck is what has to do for the SUV. They're not building a Ram Charger, it doesn't exist. So that kind of sucks. And they're not putting the 392 in like a variant of the Hypo 392 in the truck. You can get a 392 in the 3/4 ton, but it's not the engine that comes in the SRT cars. So for me, it makes it real difficult for me to get worked up about, like the 392 Jeep or anything like that when they've got platforms that are sitting out there that they could do something with and they're just choosing not to. Hey, GS1, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Saying, yeah, my 19 Scat Pack runs 12s right off the factory floor, even with 245s. Yes, it does. I mean, that is crazy stuff and was totally unheard of just a few years ago. Well, you got to remember your car. I mean, you're driving the first car to go 11s naturally aspirated from the factory. On a tire, that thing was like a legit 1190, 1180 car when they first came out with the latest operating system changes. And, let's face it, they made a few changes with the latest operating system. I mean, you're running 1170s, 1180s now with those cars in really good air. So, I mean, you tell me, that is screaming fast. And it's really hard to make an argument that, there is going to be anything that's going to be quicker than that from the factory. Yeah, modifications are modifications, and that's the other thing. Everybody wants to talk about how moddable, the Mustang is, for example. That's why I go, wait a minute. No. We're not talking about, well, if I just put a supercharger on it, or if I just, let me illustrate a point for you. Let me tell you what you just have to do to be able to afford to do those things. You just have to spend the money. And if you ain't got the money to spend, it's not even worth talking about what you can do to a Mustang. That's why I like when we're talking about stock cars, I'm talking about cars that you put a drag radial on so that the car hooks better, and in my opinion, it's safer for drag race use. When you're going to be wide open throttle for long periods of time, you need the safety of a stickier tire. Same goes on the street, is right. But yeah, anything can be modified to do whatever you want it to do. I mean, it's just an engineering exercise away from being whatever you want it to be. So I don't like talking about mods, and I don't like talking about potential when I'm talking about, the fun aspect of the cars, because again, potential costs money, like lots of money. And make no mistake, it's not, you don't just throw a supercharger on a Mustang. You know what kind of money that kind of stuff costs? We're talking 5-figure investment here. How many extra hours do you have to work? How much overtime do you have to work to cover that nut? How many shifts do you have to pick up to cover that nut? I think you know where I'm going with this. Take that number of hours that you have to work to get to that. Is it worth it? Is it more fun to just have fun with it and enjoy it for what it is? Let everybody else spend their money. It's their cars that they're blowing up, not yours. Anyway, but yeah, I'm right there with you on that one, brother, for sure. Let's see. But thank you very much, man. I appreciate the contribution. Let's see. Make sure I'm not passing anybody up here. Let's see. Oop. CJ's asking, if the F-150s are so good, then why is Ford still offering the 5-liter Coyote V8 in the F-150? So a lot of people want V8s. They want the simplicity of the V8. That's a big reason right there. And a lot of folks simply will not buy a truck unless it's got a V8 in it. That's just the way that that's just where their heads are at. So yeah, and I'm glad that they do, because you take that Coyote and throw a blower on it, and oh yeah, now you got a 10-second truck. See those at the drag time too. So that's why the market mandates that they have a V8 offering. Because believe me, Ford wouldn't offer it if the market wasn't covering for it. Ed was saying, with proper ring gap and tune, single turbo on a 6.4, do you think 10 PSI boost would be reliable? Yep. I know boost would be different than a blower. I know boost would be different than a blower, and cylinder pressure is apples to oranges. Well, no, boost is boost. Doesn't matter what kind of compressor makes it. The main thing is that, what fuel are you running with it? Of course it would be safe and reliable. If you're running E85 and it's good E85, then yeah, by that definition, it would work beautifully. But, it turns into a fuel quality issue. And, 10 PSI out of a turbo, that's easy. That's nothing with the proper fueling. But again, you got to have the ring gap. And again, I would say 27 thousandths would be about where you'd want to be. Any less than that, I think you're taking a risk. I think 25, which would be kind of the walking around average, would be too low, because the ring gap itself is shallow on the pistons. The ring land itself is shallow on the pistons, so you want a little bit wider ring gap to accommodate that. So, yeah, 27 thousandths. you know. Actually, I would probably go, rule of 7, just go 28 thousandths and call it easy. Let's see. Okay, Mopar fam saying Dakota should have had that 5.7 Hemi. That'd have been a fun try. Joshua was asking, are there any other reasons that V8 power plants are being phased out other than government fuel guidelines being imposed on manufacturers? Not really. A lot of times it's not necessarily a bad thing. The fuel economy mandates made manufacturers find much better engine management systems, which led to much more efficient V8s in the process. Manufacturers moving to the smaller engines, they're gaming. So let me tell you this, first and foremost, small engines with turbos do not get better fuel economy than properly set up V8s do. It's just not how it works. I'll give you a perfect example of that. My work truck, y'all know the work truck. It's a quad cab Ram Tradesman 5.7 Hemi with a 323 gear. That truck will nail down easy 20 to 21 miles per gallon on the freeway. It averages around 18 and a half miles per gallon no matter how I drive the thing, city, highway, what have you. If it had a smaller engine, the V6 trucks, I think, actually get worse fuel economy than the V8s do because you're in it all the time. You're constantly throttling that thing to get it to move out of its own way. But anecdotally, that's one thing. But the reason why the smaller engines don't get better fuel economy is that you have to be in them to get them to move that kind of weight. And if it's got a forced induction application to it, then you're going to be into the rich portion of that fuel curve because you're going to be in boost. If you're in boost, you got to throw even more fuel at it to cool the chamber down, to make sure that you have enough fuel for the combustion cycle to take place. All of that comes at a cost of fuel economy. So, it's one of these things where you're gaming the system. If it is a steady state test, then yeah, the smaller engine will get better fuel economy. But in a dynamic condition, that rich mode, for one, it doesn't ever go that rich, the way that a forced induction engine does. And number two, you can stay in a stoichiometric value for a much longer load profile, or a much deeper load profile than you can with something that's forced induction. So for me, it's, again, I look at it, I'm going, y'all are just gaming the system. That's all that this is. And EPA goes, well, by law, you're complying with it, and that's what it is, and so here you go. Whatever. In practice, we all know what's up when it comes to these engines, and it's but it is doing one thing that's pretty cool, and it's forcing manufacturers to get real creative with their engineering. And if you're into that sort of thing, it can get real interesting really quickly. High compression gasoline engines with forced induction and auto ignition, like the Mazda Skyactiv stuff, is pretty cool. A lot of that is going to that type of technology is going to waterfall into some of the more pedestrian forms of transportation. But a lot of cool stuff coming from that. But yeah, to answer your question, it's just a way for manufacturers to game the system. Mopar fans asking, can you list all the things what not to do to your 5.7 Hemi LX daily? Oh, damn, June bug coming at me. Whoa, that was 3D. Yeah, so what can you do? Or what not to do? I did a whole video on what works and what doesn't work for the Hemis. It boils down to this. If it's your daily, don't mod it, leave it stock. If it's something that you want to hot rod and have fun with, what not to do? The list is shorter just to tell you what to do to it. 6.4 manifolds, or better yet, long tubes with a cat back, a tune, and call it good. If it's an earlier model 5.7, then, you know, be careful with what you're doing with it, because they had a nasty habit of dropping valve seats. But, you know, if it's 15 and up, you can have a lot of fun with that thing. As far as what not to do, there's really nothing I would tell you not to do to a 5.7. You can actually have a lot of fun with that 5.7. You know, one thing I would not do is I wouldn't chop all the mufflers off of it daily. I have had to, oh God. So I got stuck with one of our customers' cars. It was a straight piped stroker, 426 stroker Hellcat. And I was data logging this thing, and I absolutely hated driving this thing. You know, 1,000 horsepower to the rear wheels, and I could not bear to get rid of it out of my life any faster. And I was having to drive this thing, just street validate the tune, making some slight changes to the transmission tune if I had to. I guess that was on the table, but there were so many problems with this car, it was like I can't even mess with this thing. It's all Alex's problem at that point. But I wanted nothing else to do with that car ever again. I hated driving that thing. So as far as a list of what not to do, that's what I would leave it at. But if you want a list of what works and doesn't work, check out those videos that I put together, and that'll help kind of steer you in the right direction. And again, GS1, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Let's see. Was it Saltec? Saying, I personally believe that us Americans are unable to do so because some people out there in our nation don't have maps. And let's see. And I believe that our education, like such as in South Africa and the IRA. Wait, how did that one go? Like such as, and therefore, what did she say? What the hell, man? I know it. Such as the. I had forgotten all about that, dude. That was funny. Thanks for the laugh. Joshua was saying, why has Toyota and Lexus discontinued all V8 power options and F-Series performance engines from any vehicles under 100 grand in their lineups? Because nobody was buying them. Believe me, if the market was there, they would be producing them in droves. But the cars were, the price point of those vehicles, they just were, the naturally aspirated V8 was at the bottom of the performance totem pole, with everybody else running, you know, like the M cars with, you know, turbo 6s. You're not going to mess with that. If you're only making 450, 470 horsepower out of that V8, you're not going to be able to mess with something that's turbocharged, fairly high boost, and those turbos come on pretty hard in those cars too. So, and not to mention they just didn't have the same panache from a branding point of view. So they just didn't sell well, and if they're not going to sell well, they're not going to make any more of them, unfortunately. But I did like the F-Type, though. That was a cool car. CJ is saying, sometimes when I drive my dad's 2019 Charger, I feel like you're in a roller coaster. Yep. CJ's asking, have I heard of a V12 before? Yeah, I heard it when I was driving a Lamborghini Superleggera. Joshua's asking, no, it's a V10, I'm sorry. Yeah, I have. A couple of V12s, actually. Quite a few V10s, though. Josh was asking, have you ever seen a Mopar 225 Super 6 with forged crank, performance tuned, or supercharged? How was it? No. Haven't ever messed with that one. Ever. Never did see that one. Cal saying he's intrigued by the Helion sleeper kit. A lot of folks are. I just don't know how or why that kit is packaged the way that it is. I've seen, I forgot that Superleggera was a V10. I have seen a couple of, no, I've seen one, only one twin turbo setup. I don't think it was the Helion. But twin turbo setup for this platform. And the problem with twin turbos on these cars is how it's packaged. The turbo ends up being right about there-ish. Kind of like almost in the transmission tunnel area. And really exposed to anything, any road debris, anything like that. So I think there's some better ways to go about it. But I don't have a lot of experience with that kit, and I was already out of the shop when that thing really started taking off. Let's see. Oh, CJ's talking about when they were asking the Ford mechanics what they would pick. Yeah, a lot of those guys were taking the Coyote over the EcoBoost primarily because at that time the EcoBoost was having its fair share of problems. Jamie saying, I can't decide to keep the 392 Scat or get a Hellcat or have both. First world problems. I know the feeling on that one. I had to get rid of mine to get this. But the Juice is saying, let's see. I'm here to warn all you car guys, please look up and read Beyond Traffic 2045. This won't be around for your grandkids. Well, we'll have to check that out. HU37 saying, you were talking about ringland and limiting the 392 as far as boost is concerned. I know Mustangs have squirters to shoot oil to cool the pistons. Do 392s have the same type of system? Yes, they do. But it's not the piston that you're worried about. It's really the ringland. Now, granted, the oil theoretically goes past the wrist pin and the top of the piston's kind of cooled, but it is, but it isn't. But it's not the piston that you're worried about. It's the actual ring that you're worried about. And if that thing gets too hot and it butts up, it'll butt up and it'll pinch at the ring gap, basically. Or in this case, there's no gap left. If it pinches there, it can pop the ringland off. The problem is that it is thin at that point. So there's no, even if it butts on a piston with a lower ringland, there's just more meat there to kind of hold the piston together. The only problem there is that ring can deform and it can cause some scoring on the cylinders that you may not ever even notice or know about for years, but it can happen. In some cases, it'll cause it to start burning oil prematurely, or at least get blow by. But the thing is that if you're going to run boost, the engine needs to be put together to handle boost, and the 392 is put together to be a very strong, high-performing, naturally aspirated engine. It's not that it can't handle boost. It will handle boost just fine, just not that much until something goes catastrophically wrong if the tune is off. But at normal boost levels, 5, 6, 7 pounds of boost, you'll probably be okay. That'll put you around, on a Mustang dyno, 550, 560 horsepower to the rear wheels. And, there's plenty of those things running around, making plenty of power. Guys are having a ball with them, basically, and these are all Pro Charge setups too. So they're a little bit easier on these engines anyway, or whatever engine they're running on. They don't develop boost as quickly, so you don't get as hard of a hit, and it's not as hot of a hit, so to speak. And when I say hot, I mean just the car's just not making as much power because it's not making as much boost. Boost is kind of a graduating, from your point of view, linear curve. So you're not going to get that hit like you would if you had a positive displacement supercharger on it. Turbos are kind of the same way too. They're just not going to experience that heat for as long. But if you open up the ring gap, you can, again, practically do whatever you wanted to do within fuel abilities, within the reasoning of whatever fuel that you're running. And you'd probably be okay. It's just nobody does that. Because if you're pulling the engine out, you're not just going to do ring gap and put it back together and throw boost at it. More than likely, you're going to put pistons and rods in it. That's what everybody's done. I've never seen anybody just go screw it and go ring gap, boost it, and see what happens. These Hemis are a little too expensive to do that too. CJ's saying the EcoBoost F-150 doesn't get that much better fuel mileage than the 5-liter. It doesn't get any better. In fact, it might get worse. saying is 2011 F-150 with a 5-liter Coyote gets 14 city and 19 highway. And CJ is checking out. We will see you around, brother. Junebug was my favorite crackhead. Let's see, Alex saying, how does the SkyActiv X technology work to increase fuel economy by at least 25%? Is it something that can be translated to the Hemi? Not really. I mean, you're talking about extremely high compression. And the latest is variable compression ratios, variable intake minutes. None of that is going to translate into anything that we're really ever going to be talking about. This is stuff that is very technical and very geeky for guys that are looking for overall efficiency. But overall efficiency, peak efficiency at cruise, things like that. And we're talking, and they're designed to run extremely lean, running on 87 octane. They just do some real nutty stuff. And then there's some newer stuff that's coming out that is where the gasoline engine is designed to basically run as a diesel engine. Basically, it's auto-ignite gasoline engine. And that's going to be nutty. And that's also going to be, it's auto-ignite, turbo stuff. There is some crazy nutty engineering that's coming from all of this. And that's why, you know, I look at it from an engineering standpoint. I go, man, this stuff is great. This is amazing. I mean, this is stuff that you just can't, you could never have fathomed years ago. You know, different metallurgy and making this stuff work long-term and be warrantable long-term and be seamless with the power delivery and all of that. These are things that you never would have been able to see in the older cars or any of these cars, even from, 10 years ago, when these ideas were first being developed and the money was being put into the R&D to get them to the point where they're at now. I mean, that was 10, 15, in some cases 15 years ago. So, yeah, there's a lot of nutty stuff, but none of it translates into what goes into these cars. Let's see, Madera's saying it all depends on the trends. Perfect example was my dad's 08 Ram 1500 5.7 4-speed auto. That thing was a gas hog, 10 to 12 miles per gallon. While not towing it, it'd go to 8 while towing. That's true. James asking, is the Sniper Cam a good match with an E-Force supercharger? Yes, it would be. But I would pulley the supercharger down because you're going to lose some boost with that Sniper Cam. But yeah, it would work out great with it. In fact, it would allow you to run significantly more boost. I'd go a Sniper Cam, long tubes, and an E-Force. Dude, that would be a nasty little combination. I've actually got a cam grind, though, for positive displacement 5.7s. Be a little bit better than the Sniper Cam for that application, mainly because it would help drag power out a little bit. It would help boost response. You'd pick up a little bit of boost over the Sniper just because the LSA is a little bit wider. Keep the intake track a little bit more active, means boost response a little bit better. And if you pulley it down a little bit, you'll be able to pick up a little bit more boost with a cam that's designed like that. So, and that'll help it drag power out on the big one a little bit. But both cams will work great with it. Let's see. And the Sniper Cam's a nasty little cam too. You don't even know it's there. You don't know it's there until it goes, and it goes right past you. Put 2 links on you, wonder what the hell just happened. Oh, GS1's asking, what do I think about the performance diff brace? I like it. I like it enough to where I've got one on my car. I've got the, they change it about every 6 months. I've got, which one do you have, Revlon? Nitrous has the previous generation to the one they have out now, but not the one, it's the single piece where you can still change out diff fluid and all that. Let's see, Jeffrey Bender's in. What up, man? Asking, are saying his brother put 45,000 in his 2018 TA29 Whipple ported Thytech bare heads 1 7/8 AR headers, max effort cam, bigger injector, AFE racing exhaust, 878 rear wheel, 798 torque, only 16 psi, 92% humidity, 2400 altitudes. Crazy. Yeah, so that's the funny thing. There's a few of those floating around. And I mean, again, you can make a ton of power at it, but look at the dollars that you're going to throw at it to get there. Let's see. Oh, he's saying he had one on his 04 Cobra. Very cool, man. Madera's checking out. Good seeing you, brother. Callus is asking, does the 5.7 have ring gap issues like the 6.4? It's not really ring gap. It's where the ringland is located. But it's got, I want to say the 5.7 from the factory has like a 15 or 8, I think it's 15 thousandths ring gap from the factory. So, yeah, not ideal for what you're up to, but for what most guys will do, you probably get away with it. Just because you're talking about a smaller bore engine in the 5.7 than you are with the 6.4. In fact, I think the ring gap is the same for the 5.7 and for the 6.4, but the 6.4 has a larger piston, so the same ring gap is going to equate to be a smaller ring gap just because the piston's bigger, percentage-wise, based on bore sizing. And the trick to that, basically the math goes like this. For an NA car, well, let's go backwards. For a boosted car, lots of boost and you want to be real safe, it's 7 thousandths for every inch of bore. If you want to go somewhat safe, and basically what most folks used to do with boost levels, I know about the boost level thing, but we're just talking generalities here. So moderate boost, say 10 pounds or less. If you're building an engine, the engine builder might go, okay, we're going to go 6 thousandths for every inch of bore. And then for NA cars, they would typically go 5 thousandths for every inch of bore. So it's still a healthy amount of ring gap either way, but it would at least help to protect the thing, and you're not going to burn any more oil or anything like that. When you clock the rings anyway, it's not going to make that big of a difference. So that's kind of been the rule of thumb, but factory, I want to say, is factory it's always going to be tight. So, and it's super tight from the factory, again, for longevity and keeping everything clean. PCV reasons as well. PCV systems, I should say. GS1 saying, thanks again for your input. Man, thanks for hanging out, brother. Alex is asking, what is your opinion on MMX cams? Modern Muscle Extreme cams. They're okay. They're constantly evolving their profiles. Comp cams came in and pretty much just slap them around with the HRT grinds, one of which I'm pretty sure is my grind. Actually, I take that. It's far enough away from my grind. It's not mine, but it's close enough to call. Makes it easier to tune. I'll say that. Theirs does. But they're fine. For off-the-shelf cams, there's a few that I like. And again, moving away from the MMX grinds, I'll just dive right into the comp cams grinds. Any of the HRT grinds are good. Stage 1 and Stage 2 are both pretty solid performing camshafts. So, and then if you want something that's a little bit more tailored for you, then get your car over to Doc Diff, and those will be one of my cams exclusively will be going in your car. So. And I also have put cams together, well, obviously for Pike's Performance. We've got some pretty sick cars on both sides of that. I think if you ever want to hear one of my cams, go. If you Google Doc Differential or Google Joker Cam, that's one of the big favorites right now. So check that thing out. Get an earful of that bad boy. Jeffrey Bitter's going, meanwhile, I'm not diving in the 45 grand swimming pool. I will shoot for 1120 and call it quits. I'm too cheap. Brother, you and I are in the same boat, man. It's kind of one of those things where a lot of folks will ask me, what else are you going to do with the Hellcat? I'm not going to do anything with the Hellcat. Hellcat's a lot of fun the way it is now, and I don't want to ruin the fun factor of it. Plus, it's reliable. Data logs look super clean. I mean, everything about the car is just so nice. So I don't want to mess with it. And believe me when I tell you, I've driven everybody's hot rod. I'm one of the few people that you'll ever talk to that's taken a Demon down the drag strip. A Demon modified down the drag strip. I've run Red Eyes stock down the drag strip. I run Red Eyes modified down the drag strip. Hellcat stock, Hellcats modified. I've driven all of them in all states of tune, and no matter how fast they are, at some point it's all the same, right? You've seen them all, you've driven them all, you've done it all. I get to come home to this when I'm blessed to have this, and I'm enjoying it. I mean, every single time I press that start button, it puts a big old smile on my face and I giggle a little bit. So, my Hellcat is one of the few cars that just puts a dumb smile on my face. This thing, and believe it or not, the 72 Sierra, even though the transmission's blown up and I got to get that thing over to Justin over at Doc Diff to get that sorted out, just driving that thing around, even though the trans is cooked, just puts a smile on my face. It relaxes me. This thing kind of does the same thing. So there's very few vehicles that do that, and me throwing pulleys and everything else with this car, it's got nothing else to prove at this point. We've got some really good DA hopefully coming to us this year, this winter. We're going to see how much deeper we can put her into the 10s this year, and go from there. Let's see. Eric's asking, would I need to do any fender work on my 2015 Challenger SRT? I recently bought 10.5-inch rims, and I'm thinking about throwing on some 305 Nitto Tri-5 R2s. Nope, you won't. There you go. You may have to move the inner fender well in a little bit. That's super easy to do. Don't fret on that at all. Just take the inner fender well, pop the push pin in, push the inner fender well in, find your little hole, take your screwdriver, go boop, poke a hole in it, and stick your fender well in, or stick your push pin in, and you're done. That's all you got to do. It'll take you way longer to get the car set up to do the work than it will to actually do the work to it. Catalyst 99 asking kind of a cool question. Do I ever have problems with the Hellcat overheating, and would you use the killer chiller? So no, never had a problem with the Hellcat overheating ever. Cooling system on these cars is really good. Would I ever use the killer chiller? I don't feel like I need it really for this car. If I had turned up the boost quite a bit and I was relying a little bit more on my intercooler to drag even more heat out of the system because I was turning the blower harder, it might be something to consider, but the killer chiller is great for consistency in hot weather, but it doesn't do you a whole lot of good in temperatures below, say, 60 degrees. It will only get the water temps down to around, say, 60 degrees anyway. So if you're letting the car cool off in between rounds, it's not a big deal. I like the Kincaid killer chiller a lot more than I like the inner chiller, mainly because it works well enough. It's considerably less expensive, and you go with the basic bare bones kit. Don't try to get the valves and just don't do it. No, don't. Get the bare bones kit, have it professionally installed, and it's actually kind of a cool contraption. Paul Moody, Racer X, we put one on his car, works great, drops the temperatures nice and low, everything's cool. Thumbs up on that. But for my car, I'm not really at that boost level. I'm not at that performance level. And it's funny too, because it's like we were talking about this the other day, and I said, man, there are days every once in a while I'll just be in a little bit more of an aggressive mood. I'm thinking, literally in the span of an afternoon, I could have this thing running 930s and 940s, like that. I mean, it would almost be that quick. In fact, the thing that would take the longest to do would be put the lower pulley on it and to put the fuel system in it. And I've thought about it, and I was like, no, because then I would want to put that killer chiller on it, and the thought of installing that makes me want to cringe and cry at the same time. So, like, nope, I'm going to leave her stock and boost at least, and, H-Town stock, as it were. But yeah. Alex is asking, what does the HRT Stage 2 kit do for the 392 versus one of your grinds? Comp promises 780 horsepower from just the cam alone, but how does that affect the torque curve? Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. First of all, no. That is not the horsepower that you'll get from the cam alone. That's the cam, the tune, exhaust. That's optimizing the cam and doing things for the cam that make it work properly. Typically, you're going to see somewhere around 60 to 70 horsepower out of one of those cams. That's just how it works. Anybody that will tell you differently is doing one of two things. They're either lying, or they're lying by omission, at least by not telling you what intake manifold you need to run, what other modifications were done to the car on the induction side. So let's just get that out of the way first, because there's a lot of BS that comes with that. And I know this because I don't care whose cam it is. If it's on the dyno, it's got to get tuned. And I just haven't seen those kind of numbers coming from that cam. It hasn't happened. In fact, that cam, that HRT cam, the Stage 2, the VE tables for my cam literally can be taken off the page and transplanted onto that cam, and it'll work fine. So that's how you know it's not going to make the same type of power, or that not to that level. But if we're talking about with long tubes, maybe a ported intake manifold, maybe a through ported throttle body, and if that number is at the flywheel, then maybe I can get on board with that. But how does it affect the torque curve? That type of a cam, that 220, 230 range on a 392, is going to raise power basically from 2,500 RPM all the way through the power curve. You'll have a slight loss in power underneath 2,500 RPM, but then from there it will pick up, numerically all the way across the board. There won't be any dips, there won't be any meetings of anything, there won't be any, swapping back and forth. It picks up power all the way across the board. Where you start to get into trouble with the 392 is if you go past that 220, 222 range. You get into the 226 range, you may pick up more power on the back end, but it could potentially be a turd down low. In fact, the cars that I've driven that have had big duration numbers, I never felt the power hit on the back end because the car was just kind of doggy down low. Now, haven't driven a lot of them, but again, the ones that I've driven were, you wouldn't really get all lathered up over it. Let's just put it to you that way. Let's see. Josh was saying, what I be just got parked. My Hellcat puts a goofy smile on my face too, bro. I love it. She looks just like yours, but I have a black hood and Demon replica rims. I am looking, dude, would love to see your car with those rims on it. I am thinking very seriously about getting rid of the slingshots and going with Demon replicas. The reason why is because look at these things and try to clean that. That is a pain in the arse. So anyway, I'm thinking about getting Demon replicas. Is curious as far as which Demon replicas did you get? Because I think I've seen a couple of them out there. Anyway, I'd love to hear about which ones you got. Let's see. GS1's asking, what is my opinion on 100 wet shot? Love it. I mean, nitrous is always good. My thing with, so run it on a progressive controller, run it based on injector duty cycle, run it on, get a cooler set of plugs in it. If you're going to run nitrous, make sure you take the precautions to run nitrous properly, get a proper nitrous tune for your vehicle. You're going to want to pull about 4 degrees of timing out of it just to be on the safe side. Cool thing about a wet shot is if you run a standalone fuel system, you can run race gas in your standalone tank, which can make things kind of nice. Instead of pulling 4 degrees, you might only pull 3 degrees, make a little bit more power with it. But, I like nitrous. It's fairly safe. Is provided that you tune it the right way. You've got a window switch involved. You're progressively hitting the car with it, and you don't try to do anything dumb with the nitrous. Like if 100 shots good, 200 shots going to be better. Not necessarily. Here's the other thing about nitrous, though. The only thing that I don't like about nitrous, well, I always say progressive, spread it in over like a 2.7 ramp up. The problem with nitrous is that it hits hard. These are heavy cars. The transmission is going to have a hard time dealing with the shock of the nitrous. If it's a Hellcat, it's an HP 90. HP 90 just doesn't care. HP 90 is the honey badger of freaking transmissions. It hit it with 100 shot, doesn't give a shit. Hit it with 1,000 horsepower, doesn't give a shit. It'll eventually wear out. Don't get me wrong. But HP 90 is a nasty ass transmission when it comes to durability, and it will put up with a lot more than it ever should on its way to failing. So just know that going into it. But the HP 70 clutches aren't quite as robust, and you can get into some clutch slip at about 530 pound-feet of torque to the rear wheels. Let's see. GS1's asking, what are the other mods involved? So, again, if you do a standalone tank, that's going to be better. Keep a pail of Sunoco GT 260 in your garage and just use that as your standalone tank. Again, you're going to want to run 7 heat range on the plug, so NGK TR, shoot, I know this off the top of my head normally, blah, 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 anyway, 7s, basically, same plug that would be in a Hellcat. You'll run those plugs. I would say Nitrous Works controller, I cannot remember the part number, but you're going to want to tune it to where when your injector duty cycle hits 60%, it starts to ramp in the nitrous. And let's say you've got full nitrous flow at 70% duty cycle. Window switch at, I'd say window switch at 5,800 RPM, just to give you a little bit of a cushion. 58 or 5,900 RPM at least, and that'll help to kill it if you spin, or if your manual transmission misses shift or something like that. You can cheat that up, and you can if your car's shifting at 62, you can window switch it at 6. But you want to have a little bit of leeway. Well, now let me think about that for a minute, because you're going to be dropping injector duty cycle. Anyway, there's some tuning to that thing that you're going to want to be aware of. Mainly because it's at the shift, because you're still going to be spraying through the shift. Screw it. Put the window switch at 6,400 RPM, ramp the whole thing through, chop timing on the shift, and you'll be fine. For now. For at least the first time it does it. Or maybe not. Alex is saying, I believe there is a company that makes lighter weight Flow Forge Demon replicas. Yeah, I need to look into that. Let's see. Donnie saying, recently Cam, my 5.7 getting issues when coming to a stop. Voltage fluctuating, but I think it's due to erratic RPMs. Any suggestions? Yes, raise your idle RPM. Also, take a look at your VE table. I would make sure that you are working with a reputable tuner that speaks fluent Mopar. But those are the two things that I would look at first and foremost. Donnie RT saying it's tuned as well. Well, I would hope so, brother. Alex is saying I was right. They're made by factory style wheels. I have to look that up. Factory style wheels, part number F152. I like it. GS1 with the thumbs up. You bet. Yeah, when it comes to nitrous, man, dude. So listen, we had some issues with nitrous cars at the shop with the HP 70s. And again, 550 foot-pounds of torque on the hit, we would get the thing slip in the transmission. And that was frustrating, to say the least. So, you know, when it comes down to it, I would say that, you know, be conservative with it, and you can have a lot of fun with them and not have to worry about it. Let's see. All right, factory style wheels, part F152. It's saying, Donnie RT saying, yeah, the damn thing blips the throttle like it's got a vacuum leak, but I've replaced every gasket in the motor. Tuner is reputable, but I'm thinking maybe it's a grounding issue too. Ugh, that would be a pain in the ass. Yeah, if you're running into something like that, that would be a, oh God, I hate dealing with wiring problems. I mean, if everything was going well before the install, it should be going well now. I would think that it's probably got something to do with the VE table, which is volumetric efficiency table down low, or it's just needs to get the idle kicked up a little bit. GS was saying, I heard a long time ago, it's like candy. Yeah, man, I mean, the more you got, the more you want, brother. And bottle babies, man, it's tough. When I put nitrous on the truck, it's going to be a 100 shot, and it's basically going to exist just so I can purge the system. And basically, when the truck goes into third, when I'm doing a little bit of a burnout, I just want to give it a little bit of that kiss to keep it going, just for those long, smoky burnouts that I want to do with that truck. So, well, guys, we are coming up on 2 hours and 45 minutes. I have got to check out of here. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with me tonight. Really do appreciate it. Can't wait to see you guys on the next one. Try to catch up with you guys possibly this weekend. I don't know what I'll be working on, but whatever I'm working on, I will bring you guys along for the ride. And that's a wrap on this one. Take a look at the Instagram. If you ever get bored or get a chance, you see all kinds of fun stuff pop up on there. You get to see me bleed all over things. Typically, I'm bumping my head or slicing parts of my body off. Working on a truck or car or whatever it is that I'm working on. You'll see, you know, me and the wife or me and the dog hanging out. So, anyway, that is a wrap on this one. Y'all have a great one. Adios.